The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of Black Creek Ridge's general store, and Evelyn Mercer stepped down into mud that hadn't seen rain in weeks. Just dust, thick and choking, the kind that got into your lungs and reminded you that this land killed soft things. She was 27 and looked older, not from age, from the particular exhaustion of having buried someone you loved, and then having to keep walking anyway. Her traveling dress was black, practically threadbare at the cuffs, and her carpet bag contained everything she owned. 3 other dresses just as worn, a Bible she hadn't opened since the funeral, and a handful of letters that proved she was qualified to teach children their numbers and letters. The driver dropped her trunk without ceremony. It hit the boardwalk hard enough to crack something inside, probably the china cup her mother had given her, the one she'd been saving for some imaginary future that felt more distant every day. Black Creek Ridge, the driver announced, like she might have forgotten where she'd paid to go. End of the line, ma'am. Stage heads back east tomorrow morning if you change your mind. Evelyn didn't answer. She was looking at the town, if you could call it that. A main street of raw timber buildings that looked like they'd been thrown together by men who couldn't afford to care about craftsmanship. A saloon that was busier at 2 in the afternoon than any church had a right to be. Storefronts with windows so dirty you couldn't see what they were selling. And people everywhere, all of them stopping what they were doing to stare at her. A woman in widow's weeds arriving alone, in a place like this that made her either desperate or dangerous. Maybe both. You the new school teacher? A man approached from the general store, wiping his hands on an apron that might have been white once. He was maybe 50, with the kind of face that looked friendly until you noticed his eyes never quite matched his smile. I am. Evelyn Mercer. James Pritchard. I run the store, sit on the town council. He glanced at her trunk. We weren't expecting you for another week. The letter said September 1st. It's September 1st. Sure, it's just... He looked uncomfortable. We haven't finished preparing the teachers' quarters yet. Nothing fancy, just a room behind the schoolhouse, but it needs work. Translation, they'd forgotten about her entirely until the stagecoach rolled in. I'm sure it's fine, Evelyn said, because what choice did she have? The stage wasn't going to wait around while she had second thoughts, and she'd spent her last money on the ticket west. Pritchard's smile returned, still not reaching his eyes. Let me get some boys to help with your trunk. You hungry? Wife makes a decent stew, nothing fancy, but it'll stick to your ribs. That's kind of you. It wasn't kind. She could see it in the way he glanced back at the store, where faces crowded the window. This was curiosity, not hospitality. They wanted to see what she was made of, whether she'd last a month before running back to whatever civilized place she'd come from. Evelyn had news for them. There was nothing civilized waiting for her back east. Just graves and memories and people who looked at her with pity that felt like acid. The schoolhouse was at the far end of town, past the saloon and the blacksmiths, and a building that didn't have a sign but reeked of old blood. Probably a butcher's or a surgeon's, maybe both. The structure was small, maybe 20 feet by 30, with actual glass windows that seemed like a miracle until you got close enough to see they were so warped the light came through in ribbons. Built it 2 years ago, Pritchard said, unlocking the door with a key that stuck in the lock. Town's growing. Got maybe 30 children now, different ages. Some of them have had schooling, most haven't. Previous teacher lasted 6 months before she left. Why did she leave? Pritchard's pause lasted a beat too long. Homesick, I expect. Frontier life isn't for everyone. He pushed the door open and Evelyn stepped into the room that would be her world for the foreseeable future. Rough wooden floors, benches that looked hand-built by someone without much skill at building, a desk at the front that wobbled when she touched it, slate boards on the walls, some cracked, a potbelly stove in the corner that was going to be useless come winter because there wasn't nearly enough wood stacked beside it. And in the back corner, a door. Her quarters. The room was barely bigger than a cell, a cot with a mattress that smelled like mice had died in it, a washstand with a chipped basin, one window, north-facing, that let in light but no warmth. The walls were bare wood, gaps between the boards wide enough that she could see through to the schoolroom. Like I said, Pritchard offered weakly, it needs work. It's fine, Evelyn set her carpet bag on the cot. The frame creaked ominously. When do I start teaching? Monday. That gives you the weekend to settle in, get your lessons ready. He was backing toward the door already, eager to leave. Sunday service is at 10 if you're inclined. Reverend Marsh likes to meet new arrivals. Welcome them proper. I'll be there. After he left, Evelyn sat on the cot and let herself feel it, the full weight of how alone she was. No husband, no family, no friends, just her in this dying frontier town that looked at her like she was something to be tolerated until she gave them a reason to do otherwise. Through the warped window, she could see the mountains in the distance, dark peaks against a darkening sky, vast and indifferent. The wilderness that men came west to conquer, or to hide in, or to die trying. Jacob would have hated it here. Her husband had been a city man, soft hands and softer dreams. The war had taken him like it took everyone else. Not gloriously, not meaningfully, just gone one day with a letter from his commanding officer that said he'd died bravely. The letter was a lie. Jacob had been terrified of violence, probably died terrified too. She wasn't going to think about that. Not now. Not when she had to figure out how to survive the night in a room that was colder inside than out. Evelyn stood and started unpacking. It didn't take long. Sunday came, and with it, the church. It wasn't much. Another rough timber building, this one with a crooked cross nailed above the door like an afterthought. Inside, maybe 60 people crowded onto benches that groaned under the weight, all of them dressed in their Sunday clothes that looked like everyday clothes with slightly less dirt. Evelyn sat in the back, aware of every eye that turned to assess her. The women especially. They looked at her black dress, her bare hands, the way she kept her spine straight and her eyes forward, calculating whether she was competition or threat or just another temporary problem. Reverend Marsh was a thin man with a voice that didn't match his frame, big and booming, the kind that filled spaces and demanded attention. His sermon was about temptation, about the dangers of pride and ambition, about how the Lord valued humility above all else. It wasn't subtle. Evelyn was pretty sure it was aimed at her. After the service, the Reverend made a point of greeting her personally. His handshake was limp, slightly damp. "Mrs. Mercer, welcome to Black Creek Ridge. I trust you're settling in? As well as can be expected, thank you. Teaching is holy work," he continued, still holding her hand a beat too long, shaping young minds, guiding them toward righteousness. Of course, it's important that teachers understand their place. We're a traditional community. Certain modern ideas don't take root well here. I plan to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, Reverend, not revolution. His smile was cold. Of course, I'm sure we'll have no problems then. Around them, people were clustering into groups, talking in low voices. Evelyn caught fragments. Her husband. War widow. Why would she come here? Heard the last teacher. A woman approached, older, maybe 60, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. "I'm Clara Jennings. My grandson will be in your class. He's a good boy, but he doesn't need fancy notions put in his head. His father works the mines. That's what he'll do too." "Every child deserves to learn," Evelyn said carefully. "Learning is fine. Ambition is dangerous." Clara's eyes were hard as flint. "This is a simple place, Mrs. Mercer. We like it that way." After Clara walked away, another woman slid into her place. Younger this time, maybe 30, with a face that might have been pretty if suspicion hadn't carved lines around her mouth. Margaret Pritchard, James's daughter-in-law. Word of advice, don't trust anyone who's too friendly, and don't trust anyone who isn't. That doesn't leave much room for trust at all. Margaret's smile was sharp. Now you're catching on. By the time Evelyn left the church, her head was pounding. Every interaction had felt like a test she didn't know she was taking, questions underneath questions, and she'd apparently failed most of them just by existing. She walked back toward the schoolhouse alone, very aware that she was being watched. People in doorways, on porches, behind windows, all of them tracking her progress like she was something that needed monitoring. That's when she first saw him. A man on horseback, maybe half a mile out, silhouetted against the ridgeline. Too far to make out features, but close enough to be deliberate. He wasn't moving, just sitting there, watching the town, watching her. Evelyn stopped walking, stared back. The man didn't move. Then a wagon rolled past, kicking up dust, and when it cleared, he was gone. She told herself it was nothing, just a rancher checking his property, or a drifter passing through. The frontier was full of men on horses watching from ridges, but her hands were shaking when she unlocked the schoolhouse door. Tick. Monday arrived with 32 children and 32 different levels of preparation. Some could read basic words. Others didn't know the alphabet. The older boys slouched in the back with their arms crossed, radiating contempt for the entire concept of education. The younger ones seemed curious until their older siblings shot them warning looks. Evelyn wrote her name on the slate board in careful letters. I'm Mrs. Mercer. For the next 9 months, this room is where you'll learn to read, write, and calculate. Some of you already have these skills, others don't. That's fine. We all start somewhere. One of the older boys, maybe 14, already with the build of someone who'd spent years doing hard labor, spoke up. My pa says reading's for people who got nothing better to do. Your father is entitled to his opinion. What's your name? Caleb Jennings. Of course, Clara's grandson. Well, Caleb, reading lets you understand contracts before you sign them. Writing lets you send letters without paying someone else to do it. Arithmetic keeps people from cheating you when you sell your labor. Your father might not value these things, but I suspect you will once you're a man making your own decisions. Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't argue, but he didn't look convinced either. The day lurched forward in fits and starts. Evelyn divided the children into 3 groups by skill level, rotating between them, trying to keep everyone occupied. It was chaos. The youngest ones couldn't sit still. The middle group wouldn't stop talking. The oldest ones radiated hostility disguised as boredom. By the time she dismissed them at 3 o'clock, her voice was hoarse and her head felt like someone had been using it for target practice. She was erasing the slate board when she heard the knock. Not on the door, on the window. Evelyn turned. No one there. But when she walked to the window and looked down, she saw it. A rock, fist-size, sitting on the sill, and underneath it, a piece of paper. Her hands were steady as she picked it up, unfolded it. Block letters, written in heavy pencil. Leave while you can. No signature, no explanation. Just 5 words and the implicit threat underneath them. Evelyn stared at the note for a long moment. Then she folded it, put it in her desk drawer, and went back to erasing the board. She wasn't leaving. She had nowhere to go. The notes kept coming, 1 a day for the first week, each one escalating slightly. You don't belong here. Go back east. Widows bring bad luck. They appeared in different places, tucked under her door, wedged in the schoolhouse window frame, once even inside her desk, which meant someone had been in the schoolroom when she wasn't. Evelyn didn't tell anyone. What would she say? That someone was trying to scare her away? In a town where everyone already made it clear she wasn't welcome, who would care? She taught her classes, dealt with resistant students and suspicious parents, ate meals alone in her cold room, heating beans on a small stove that barely worked. At night she lay awake listening to the wind and the creaking building and the sounds of the town settling into its evening rhythms, shouting from the saloon, horses on the main street, occasional gunshots that might have been celebrations or might have been something worse. And every evening, around dusk, she saw him again. The man on the ridge, always at a distance, always watching. Sometimes from the east, sometimes from the west, but always there. Silent and still as a gravestone. She asked James Pritchard about it one afternoon when she came to buy supplies. There's a man who watches the town from the ridges. Who is he? Pritchard's face went carefully blank. That's Rhett Callahan. He's got a ranch up in the mountains, keeps to himself mostly. Why does he watch the town? No one knows. Some say he's touched, war did something to his head. Others say he's dangerous, that he's killed men. Pritchard leaned closer, lowering his voice. My advice? Pretend you don't see him. Rhett Callahan isn't the kind of man a respectable woman should take interest in. I wasn't taking interest, I was asking a question. But Pritchard had already moved on, helping another customer, conversation over. That night, Evelyn stood at her window and stared at the ridge where the man usually appeared. Right on schedule, just as the sun touched the mountains, he materialized, motionless, watching. She lifted her hand, waved. For a long moment, nothing. Then, barely visible in the distance, the man raised his hand. Once. A gesture that could have been acknowledgement or warning or just the wind playing tricks with shadows. Then he turned his horse and disappeared into the darkness. Evelyn stood at this window long after he'd gone, trying to figure out what she'd just done and why her heart was beating faster than it should. The second week brought new problems. Parents started pulling children from class. Not all of them, just enough to make it clear this was coordinated. Clara Jennings came personally to collect her grandson, announcing loudly in the schoolroom that she wouldn't have Caleb exposed to unnatural ideas about his station in life. 2 days later, Margaret Pritchard showed up to retrieve her daughter. "Nothing personal," she said, not meeting Evelyn's eyes. "Just think she'd be better off learning at home." By Friday, Evelyn's class had dropped from 32 students to 19. Reverend Marsh visited the schoolhouse that afternoon, arriving just as she was dismissing the children. He watched them file out, then turned to her with a smile that had too many teeth. "Mrs. Mercer, I've been hearing concerns from parents. They feel you're perhaps overreaching in your curriculum. I'm teaching reading and mathematics." "Yes, but with what intent? Some of the children have mentioned you telling them they could be more than what their parents are. That's a dangerous thing to suggest to young minds." Evelyn set down her slate. "I told them that education creates opportunities. That's not controversial, Reverend. That's fact. In the city, perhaps. Here, it's disruption." His voice hardened. "This town has an order, Mrs. Mercer. People know their places. When you tell children they can rise above their circumstances, you're telling them their parents' lives are insufficient. That breeds resentment, division, or it breeds progress." Progress. He said the word like it tasted rotten. The last teacher had similar ideas. She didn't last long either. "What happened to her?" Marsh smiled. "She learned that some places don't want to be changed. They want to be left alone." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You seem like an intelligent woman, Mrs. Mercer. Intelligent enough to recognize when you're fighting a battle you can't win. There's no shame in admitting this position isn't suitable." After he left, Evelyn sat at her desk and stared at the empty classroom. 19 students left. How long before that became 10, 5, 0? She could leave. Get on the next stage east, find another town, another teaching position. Start over somewhere less hostile. But she'd already run once. From her grief, from her memories, from the life she'd lost when Jacob died. And where had it gotten her? Still alone, still afraid. Still wondering if she'd ever feel like herself again. No, she wasn't running again. The note that appeared that night was different from the others. Longer, more detailed. Last warning, leave or accidents start happening. To you, to your students. Don't test us. Evelyn read it twice, then walked outside into the cold night air. The town was dark except for light spilling from the saloon. Above, stars scattered across the sky in patterns she didn't recognize. Too many of them, making the darkness between them seem even darker. She looked toward the ridge. No one there. "I know you're watching," she said to the empty darkness. "Whoever you are, whatever you want, I'm not leaving." The wind was the only answer. Evelyn went back inside, locked the door, and wedged a chair under the handle. Then she pulled out her late husband's revolver, the one thing of his she'd kept besides memories, and checked that it was loaded. She didn't sleep that night, just sat in the darkness, listening, waiting for footsteps that never came. The man appeared in town 3 days later. Evelyn was in the general store buying lamp oil when the room went quiet. Not the normal small-town quiet of people pausing to gossip. Something heavier, fearful. She turned and saw him in the doorway. Rhett Callahan was massive, maybe 6'4", built like someone who'd spent his life doing hard physical labor and fighting things that fought back. His face was weathered, scarred, a line through his left eyebrow, another across his jaw. Dark hair long enough to touch his collar, eyes that scanned the room like he was cataloging threats. He wore range clothes that had seen better years, a gun belt with 2 revolvers that looked maintained enough to be functional, and an expression that suggested he didn't give a damn what anyone in this room thought of him. James Pritchard recovered first. "Rhett, didn't expect to see you in town." "Need supplies." Callahan's voice was low, rough from disuse. He moved toward the counter, and people shifted away from him like he was carrying disease. Evelyn stayed where she was, watching. Pritchard started gathering items with shaking hands. Coffee, flour, ammunition, rope. "Been quiet up at your place?" "Quiet enough." "That's good. That's real good." Pritchard was talking too fast, nervous energy pouring out. "Weather's holding. Should be a mild winter. That'll be nice for everyone." "Pritchard." "Yeah?" Just the supplies. Pritchard swallowed whatever else he'd been about to say and finished tallying the order. Callahan paid in silver coins, counted exact, then started loading items into his saddlebag. That's when his eyes found Evelyn. The look lasted maybe 3 seconds. Long enough for her to see that his eyes were gray, pale as smoke. Long enough for something to pass between them. Recognition, maybe, or just acknowledgement that they'd both been pretending not to notice each other. Then he nodded once, slight, and walked out. The store erupted in whispers the moment the door closed. Actually came into town. Looking at the teacher like that? Dangerous. Everyone knows what he did during the war. Evelyn finished paying for her lamp oil and left while they were still talking. Outside, she caught a glimpse of Callahan riding away, headed back toward the mountains. He didn't look back. That night, no note appeared, or the night after. For 3 days, nothing. No threats, no warnings, no rocks through windows. Just silence. Evelyn wanted to believe the notes had stopped because whoever was sending them had given up. But something told her that wasn't it. Something told her Rhett Callahan's appearance in town hadn't been about supplies at all. The 4th week brought the first real violence. Evelyn was walking back from the well, carrying 2 buckets of water, when 3 men stepped out from beside the saloon. She recognized them vaguely. Ranch hands, probably, the kind who spent their wages on whiskey and their days nursing resentment. The tallest one, with a beard that looked like it housed livestock, smiled at her. "Afternoon, teacher." Evelyn kept walking. "Afternoon. Heard you're still trying to educate our children? That's real persistent of you." "It's my job." See, that's the thing. He moved to block her path. His friends fanned out, cutting off escape routes. "Some of us think maybe you should find a different job. Someplace else, someplace that wants you." "I have a contract with the town council." "Contracts can be broken." He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell the alcohol on him. "Accidents happen to women alone. Everyone knows that." Evelyn's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice level. "Are you threatening me?" "Just offering friendly advice." She went to step around him, and he grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, not yet, but firm enough to make his point. "Let me go." "Or what? You gonna scream?" "Ain't nobody coming, teacher. This town don't want you here." Evelyn dropped one of the buckets. Water splashed across his boots. In the moment of distraction, she swung the second bucket hard into his knee. He went down cursing, and she ran. Made it maybe 20 feet before hands grabbed her from behind, yanking her backward. One of the other men, laughing now, spinning her around. "You got spirit, I'll give you that." The man stopped talking. His eyes went wide, focused on something behind her. Evelyn felt it before she saw it. A presence, large and cold and absolutely terrifying. Rhett Callahan's voice came from directly behind her. "Let her go." The man's hands released immediately. He stepped back, then back again, almost tripping. We were just talking," looked like more than talking. Callahan moved forward, and even though Evelyn couldn't see his face, she heard the threat in every syllable. "You boys got about 3 seconds to disappear before I make you disappear." They ran. Actually ran, scrambling away like children caught stealing. Evelyn turned slowly. Callahan stood maybe 10 feet away, one hand resting on his gun belt, the other loose at his side. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were tracking the men's retreat like a predator, making sure prey knew not to come back. "Thank you," Evelyn managed. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not warmth exactly, more like a crack in ice, brief and then gone. "You hurt?" "No, scared, but not hurt." "Good." He picked up the dropped bucket, filled it from the trough nearby, and handed it to her. "You shouldn't walk alone, not at night, not even during the day. Not until this stops." "Until what stops?" "Whatever's coming. Town's got a bad feeling to it right now, like something's building." "You live in the mountains. How do you know what the town feels like?" His mouth almost smiled. "Almost." "I watch." "I know, I've seen you." Evelyn hesitated. "Why?" Callahan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, almost reluctant. "Because you remind me of something I thought I'd forgotten. What it's like when someone doesn't belong somewhere but stays anyway, Because leaving means admitting you've been beaten. And you think I'm going to be beaten? I think you're going to try not to be. That's dangerous in a place like this. He started to turn away, and Evelyn spoke without thinking. What did you do during the war? Callahan stopped, didn't turn back. Things I'm not proud of. Things that were necessary. Things that mean I understand exactly what men are capable of when they decide someone needs to disappear. Is that what's happening? Someone's decided I need to disappear? Yes. Why? Don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Then he did walk away, leading his horse back toward the mountains, leaving Evelyn standing alone with 2 buckets of water and more questions than she had any hope of answering. That night, she dreamed of smoke and gunfire and a man with gray eyes standing between her and darkness. When she woke, she wasn't sure if it had been a nightmare or a promise. The encounter with Rhett Callahan changed something fundamental in how the town looked at Evelyn. Before, she'd been an annoyance, a stubborn woman who didn't know her place. Now she was something worse, protected. Word spread fast in Black Creek Ridge. By the next morning, everyone knew that Rhett had stepped in when the ranch hands cornered her. By afternoon, the story had mutated into 3 different versions, each one painting Evelyn as either a seductress who'd manipulated the dangerous mountain man, or a fool who'd made a deal with the devil, or both simultaneously. The remaining parents pulled 5 more children from her class. Evelyn stood in front of 14 students on Monday morning and tried to pretend her world wasn't collapsing. The children who remained were mostly the younger ones, kids whose parents either didn't care enough to yank them out or were too poor to keep them home when they could be getting free education. Today we're going to work on multiplication, she announced, writing numbers on the slate board with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't. Not in front of them. Who can tell me what 6 times 7 equals? Silence. The kind that felt intentional. Then a small voice from the front row. 42, ma'am. Evelyn turned. The speaker was a girl, maybe 8 years old, with blonde braids and a dress that had been patched so many times the original fabric was hard to identify. She sat alone, separated from the other children by an invisible barrier that somehow seemed more solid than walls. That's correct. What's your name? Sarah Brennan, ma'am. Thank you, Sarah. That's excellent work. One of the older boys muttered something that sounded like teacher's pet, and Sarah's face went red. She didn't answer another question for the rest of the day. After class, Evelyn found the girl lingering by the door, clearly wanting to say something, but not sure how. Sarah, did you need something? The girl twisted her hands together. I wanted to say I'm glad you're still here. Teaching us, I mean. My pa says reading's important. He can't read himself, but he says that's why he wants better for me. Your father sounds like a wise man. He works in the mines. Most days he comes home so tired he can barely talk, but he always asks what I learned. Sarah's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. The other kids, they say you're going to leave soon like the last teacher. They say nobody stays in Black Creek Ridge if they got a choice. But I hope you stay. The words hit harder than they should have. Evelyn knelt down so she was eye level with the girl. I'm not planning on leaving, Sarah, no matter what people say. Even if it gets bad? What makes you think it'll get bad? Sarah glanced around like she was checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned in close. Because grown-ups are acting funny. My pa came home last week and told my ma to keep me close. Said there's trouble coming, something about money and land and people getting angry. He wouldn't say more, but I heard him loading his rifle before bed. Pa never loads his rifle unless he thinks there's going to be shooting. A cold finger traced down Evelyn's spine. Your father didn't mention who might be in trouble? No, ma'am. Just said to keep quiet and stay out of town business. Sarah picked up her books. I should go. Ma'll worry if I'm late. After the girl left, Evelyn sat at her desk and tried to make sense of fragments that refused to form a picture. Threats. Violence. A town that wanted her gone but wouldn't say why. And now talk of rifles and trouble coming. She pulled out the notes from her drawer, all 11 of them, arranged in chronological order. Reading them again, she noticed something she'd missed before. The handwriting was educated, almost refined. These weren't written by illiterate ranch hands. Whoever wanted her gone had enough learning to form proper letters. That narrowed the suspects considerably. A knock on the door made her shove the notes back in the drawer. Margaret Pritchard stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Mrs. Mercer, got a minute?" "Of course, come in." Margaret didn't sit, just stood there, radiating discomfort. "I'm here because I feel guilty. About pulling Lily from your class. You have every right to make decisions about your daughter's education." "That's just it. It wasn't my decision. James insisted. Said the family couldn't afford to look like we were supporting you, not with the town council divided the way it is." Evelyn leaned forward. "Divided how?" Margaret glanced toward the open door, then moved to close it. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "There's two camps forming. Reverend Marsh and Mayor Hastings on one side, saying the town needs traditional values and you're a disruption. Then there's a smaller group, my father-in-law included, who think you're doing fine and the resistance is about something else entirely." "What else could it be about?" "That's the question nobody's answering. But James has been acting strange. Coming home late from council meetings, having quiet conversations that stop when I walk in the room. Last week I found a legal document in his desk, something about mineral rights and land surveys. He caught me looking and nearly took my head off." "Did you see what property the survey was for?" "No, but—" Margaret hesitated, clearly wrestling with whether to continue. "Your husband was in the war, right? Did he leave you anything besides his personal effects?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. "Some letters, his uniform. Why?" "No legal documents, deeds, titles, anything like that?" Evelyn stopped, thought back to the trunk she'd inherited, the one she'd barely looked through because touching Jacob's things felt like reopening wounds. "There might be. I haven't gone through everything." "You should, soon." Margaret moved toward the door. "Whatever's happening in this town, it's bigger than you teaching children their letters. Be careful, Mrs. Mercer, and maybe find that trunk." After Margaret left, Evelyn pulled her late husband's trunk from where it sat in the corner of her small room, covered with a sheet like she could hide it from her own memory. The metal was cold under her hands. She hadn't opened it since arriving in Black Creek Ridge, hadn't wanted to face the ghost of the man she'd loved and lost. The hinges protested as she lifted the lid. Inside, Jacob's uniform neatly folded, his watch, stopped at 3:15, a packet of letters she'd sent him, tied with string, and underneath everything a leather portfolio she didn't recognize. Evelyn pulled it out. The leather was quality, expensive, not something Jacob would have bought for himself. Their marriage had been comfortable, but never wealthy. Inside the portfolio were documents, legal documents. Her hands trembled as she unfolded them and started reading. Last will and testament of Tobias Mercer, Jacob's uncle, the man who'd raised him after his parents died, who'd owned a small freight business back east. Evelyn had met him once, briefly, before he'd passed away 2 years before Jacob enlisted. She kept reading, words blurring together until one section jumped out. To my nephew Jacob Mercer, I bequeath all property and mineral rights pertaining to Survey Plot 447-B, located in the Black Creek Ridge Mining District, Montana Territory, comprising approximately 640 acres, including all subsurface mineral deposits, water rights, and easements therein. Evelyn read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. She owned land here. Not just any land, 640 acres in the mining district. And according to the survey map included in the documents, the property stretched across the valley east of town, encompassing the richest silver deposits in the entire region. Her late husband had inherited it, which meant when he died, it passed to her. She owned the land that half the town was probably mining illegally. Suddenly, everything made sense. The hostility, the threats, the desperate need to drive her away before she realized what she had. Because if she knew about the inheritance, if she claimed it properly, every mine operation in that valley would owe her money. Years of back payments. Maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. Evelyn sat back, the documents trembling in her hands. She wasn't just a widow teacher they wanted gone. She was a threat to the entire economic structure of Black Creek Ridge, and they would kill to protect it. A sound outside made her freeze, footsteps on the schoolhouse porch, slow and deliberate. She shoved the documents back in the portfolio and stood, heart hammering. The door opened without a knock. Rhett Callahan filled the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable in the confined space like a wolf trying to pretend it belonged in a parlor. You need to leave, he said without preamble. Tonight. What? Pack your things. I'll take you to the stage station in Copper Falls. It's a day's ride, but safer than staying here. Evelyn's initial shock gave way to anger. You can't just barge in here and order me to leave. I'm not ordering. I'm telling you what needs to happen if you want to stay alive. He stepped inside, closing the door. I've been asking questions, listening to conversations men have when they think nobody's watching. You're in danger, Mrs. Mercer. Real danger. The kind that ends with you disappearing and nobody asking questions. I know about the land. That stopped him. His expression shifted, surprise breaking through the usual careful blankness. What? Evelyn held up the portfolio. I own 640 acres of the mining district. My husband inherited it from his uncle, which means it's mine now. And I'm guessing half the operations in this valley are working claims they don't legally have rights to. Rhett crossed the room in 3 steps and took the documents from her hands, scanning them quickly. His jaw tightened as he read. How long have you known? About an hour. A woman from town told me to look for legal papers. I thought she was being paranoid. Evelyn laughed, but it came out hollow. Turns out she wasn't paranoid enough. Do you understand what this means? You're not just a problem they want to solve. You're a financial catastrophe waiting to happen. Every mine owner, every businessman who's made money off that land, they all have a reason to make sure you never file a legal claim. Then I won't file a claim. I'll leave the land to them. Sign it over, whatever they want. You think they'll trust that? Rhett's voice was harsh. You think they'll risk you changing your mind or telling someone else or a federal inspector showing up because you mentioned it in a letter? The only way they're safe is if you're gone. Permanently. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Evelyn sat down before her legs could give out. What am I supposed to do? What I said. Leave. Tonight. Start over somewhere they can't find you. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. She met his eyes. I spent the last 2 years running from my grief, from my life, from everything that reminded me I'd lost someone I loved. I thought coming here would help me hide from all of it. But I'm tired of hiding, Mr. Callahan. I'm tired of being afraid, and I'm tired of men telling me the only way to survive is to disappear. Something shifted in Rhett's expression, not quite approval, but recognition, like he'd heard his own thoughts spoken back to him. You'll die here, he said quietly. Maybe, but at least I'll die standing my ground instead of running from it. That's not courage, that's stubbornness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Rhett was quiet for a long moment, staring at the document still in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, almost reluctant, like he was making a decision that would cost him something. If you're staying, you need protection. The kind the law won't provide because the law in this town answers to the men who want you dead. What kind of protection? Mine. Evelyn blinked. What? I'll watch your back. Make sure nothing happens to you while we figure out who's pulling the strings and how to stop them. He set the documents on her desk. But you need to understand something. The men I fought during the war, the tracking I did, the things I'm known for, I'm not exaggerating when I say I know how to hurt people. That's not a skill I'm proud of, but it's what I have. And if someone comes after you, I won't hesitate to use it. Why would you do this? You don't know me. Rhett moved toward the door, then stopped, his back to her. Because I've spent 5 years on that mountain trying to forget what it feels like to care about something other than survival. And then you showed up, a woman alone in a hostile town, teaching children even when everyone told you to quit, refusing to run even when running would save your life. He turned, and for the first time his face was completely open. You remind me of who I used to be before the war, before I learned that caring about things gets them killed. And maybe I'm a fool, but I'd like to try protecting something good for once instead of just killing bad things. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. The honesty in it was raw, almost painful to witness. I don't expect you to trust me, Rhett continued, but I'm telling you right now, if you stay, people will come for you, and when they do, you'll want someone standing between you and them who knows how to fight dirty. I have a gun. Can you shoot it? I've never tried. Rhett almost smiled. Then you don't have a gun. You have a metal paperweight. He opened the door. I'll be watching the ridge tonight. If anyone approaches this building, I'll know. Tomorrow, we figure out who exactly wants you dead and how to convince them it's a bad idea. And if we can't convince them, then we make them regret trying." He left without another word, dissolving into the evening shadows like he'd never been there at all. Evelyn sat alone in the darkening schoolhouse, staring at the legal documents that had just transformed her from a struggling teacher into a walking target. Outside, the town was settling into its nightly routine. Somewhere, men were making plans to remove her from the equation. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part, the part that had survived her husband's death and traveled west alone and refused to quit teaching even when the town turned hostile, that part was getting angry. They wanted her land. Fine, but they'd have to take it from her while she was still breathing. And now she had a scarred mountain man with dead eyes and dangerous skills standing between her and anyone who tried. Evelyn locked the schoolhouse door and went to bed with Jacob's revolver under her pillow and the legal documents hidden inside her mattress. Sleep came in fragments, broken by sounds that might have been wind or might have been footsteps. On the ridge outside town, a man sat on a black horse and watched the schoolhouse until dawn. The next morning brought visitors. Evelyn was preparing the day's lessons when Mayor Hastings arrived with Reverend Marsh and James Pritchard in tow. 3 men, all wearing expressions that tried to look concerned but came off as calculating. "Mrs. Mercer," Mayor Hastings began, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Might we have a word?" She set down her chalk. "Of course." The mayor was a thick man in his 50s, successful enough to afford tailored suits, but not successful enough to pull them off. His smile was practiced, political. "We've been hearing troubling reports. Some of the parents are concerned about your associations." "My associations?" "Rhett Callahan was seen entering the schoolhouse yesterday evening, alone. That's created some unfortunate speculation about your character." Evelyn felt heat rise in her chest. "My character is none of this town's business." "It is when you're teaching our children," Reverend Marsh interjected. "We have standards, Mrs. Mercer, moral standards that must be upheld by those in positions of influence. Mr. Callahan and I discuss school matters, nothing more." "School matters?" The mayor's tone made it clear he didn't believe her. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm going to be frank with you. This town has tried to be accommodating. We hired you sight unseen, provided housing, gave you an opportunity, but you've created division and discord. Perhaps it's time to admit this position isn't working out. I have a contract. Contracts can be terminated for cause. Moral turpitude certainly qualifies." "There has been no moral turpitude. You're inventing scandal because you want me gone." The 3 men exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. James Pritchard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mercer, there's another matter we need to discuss. It's come to our attention that you may have inherited property in the area. Property that could complicate certain existing arrangements." There it was. The real reason for their visit. Evelyn kept her face neutral. "I don't know what you're referring to. Your late husband's family owned land near Black Creek Ridge, mining land. If you've discovered documents related to that property, we'd like to help you understand the situation. Help me understand or help me sign away my rights." The mayor's smile turned cold. "You're a stranger here, Mrs. Mercer. You don't understand how things work in the territories. Land claims are complicated. Ownership is often disputed. The men who've been working those claims for years have put blood and money into developing them. They have families depending on that income. Then they should have made sure they had legal rights before mining someone else's property. Is that what you think this is? Theft?" Reverend Marsh stepped forward, his voice rising. "The people of this town are honest, hard-working folk. They're not criminals. If there's been a misunderstanding about ownership, it can be resolved fairly. But not if you come in here acting like you're owed something just because you have a piece of paper. The law says I am owed something, years of something, if I'm reading those documents correctly." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Mayor Hastings put his hat back on, the pretense of friendliness completely gone. "Mrs. Mercer, you're making a serious mistake, the kind that could have consequences you haven't thought through." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. This town takes care of its own, and you're not one of us." He moved toward the door, the other 2 following. "I strongly suggest you reconsider your position, for your own safety." After they left, Evelyn had to sit down because her legs were shaking, not from fear, from rage. They just walked into her schoolhouse and threatened her while pretending to be concerned for her welfare. She was still sitting there trying to collect herself when the first students started arriving. Sarah Brennan came in and immediately noticed something was wrong. "Are you okay, Mrs. Mercer?" Evelyn forced a smile. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just a difficult morning. Take your seat." But teaching that day was nearly impossible. Her mind kept drifting to the mayor's words, to the legal documents hidden in her room, to the very real possibility that she wouldn't survive the week. At lunch, she walked to the ridge where she'd seen Rhett watching. He was there, sitting on a flat rock, eating jerky and scanning the valley below. He saw her coming but didn't stand, just watched her approach with those pale gray eyes that missed nothing. "The mayor and the reverend visited me this morning," she said without preamble. "They know about the land. Expected. They threatened me, very politely, but it was definitely a threat. Also expected." Rhett tore off another piece of jerky. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to march down to the federal land office and file a formal claim just to watch them squirm. Part of me thinks that would be signing my death warrant. Both things are probably true." He stood, brushing dust off his pants. "You want my advice?" "That's why I came up here." "File the claim, but do it smart. Get copies of everything. Send one set to a lawyer outside the territory. Make sure people know you've protected yourself. That way, if something happens to you, those documents still exist and the federal government will investigate." "Won't that just make them more desperate to stop me?" "They're already desperate. Difference is, this way, you're protected even if they succeed." He moved closer, his expression serious. "Evelyn? Can I call you Evelyn?" She nodded. "These men, they're used to problems going away when they apply enough pressure. Women leaving town, witnesses disappearing, evidence getting lost. What they're not used to is someone who fights back with the law on their side. If you make yourself too expensive to kill, they'll have to find another solution." "Like what?" "Negotiation. You're willing to settle for less than you're owed, right? So settle, but from a position of strength. Get your claim filed, get your legal protection in place, then offer them a deal. They pay you something, not everything, but something, and you sign away future rights. Everyone gets to save face, and you get to stay alive." It made sense. Brutal sense, but sense nonetheless. "Will you come with me?" Evelyn heard herself ask. "To file the claim?" "I don't trust going alone." Rhett was quiet for a moment. "If I go with you, it makes you look weak, like you need a man's protection to do business. Better if you go alone, walk in there like you own the place, which you do, and make them understand you're not someone who can be intimidated." "I am someone who can be intimidated. I'm terrified right now." Being scared and being intimidated aren't the same thing. Scared means you understand the danger. Intimidated means you let the danger control you. He picked up his rifle. "Go file your claim, Evelyn. I'll make sure no one stops you on the road." She wanted to argue, to say she needed him there, to admit that walking into a government office alone felt impossible. But he was right. If she was going to survive in Black Creek Ridge, she needed to stop looking like a victim and start acting like someone who belonged here. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. This is about to get a lot worse before it gets better." The federal land office was in a town called Copper Falls, 30 miles west. Evelyn borrowed a horse from the stable, paid double what it should have cost because the owner clearly didn't want to rent to her, and left before dawn the next morning. The ride took most of the day. Every shadow made her flinch. Every sound might have been someone following, but when she looked back, the only figure she saw was far in the distance, staying just close enough to intervene if needed. Rhett, keeping his promise. The land office was a small building staffed by a bored clerk who perked up considerably when Evelyn laid out her documents. He studied them for a long time, cross-referencing survey maps and deed records, occasionally muttering to himself. Finally, he looked up. "Ma'am, if these documents are authentic, and they appear to be, you own some of the most valuable mining land in Montana Territory." "I know. There are currently 17 active claims operating on this property. None of them filed through proper channels, with the original owner's permission." "I know that too." The clerk whistled low. "You're about to make a lot of people very unhappy." "Add it to the list." Evelyn signed the papers he put in front of her. How long until the claim is official? It's official now. I'll file these with the territorial government. You'll get a certified copy within 6 weeks. In the meantime, he handed her a temporary certificate. This proves you've filed. Anyone operating on your land without permission is now officially trespassing. Evelyn took the certificate with shaking hands. It was done. No taking it back now. She paid the filing fee and walked outside into afternoon sun that felt too bright, too normal for what she'd just done. Somewhere back in Black Creek Ridge, 17 mine operations had just become illegal. 17 businesses had just lost their legal protection. And every single one of them would blame her. The ride back was worse than the ride there. Knowing what she'd done, what it meant, made every mile feel heavier. By the time she reached the outskirts of Black Creek Ridge, night had fallen and exhaustion was pulling at her like hands. Rhett materialized from the shadows near the stable. "It's done?" "It's done." He took the horse's reins. "Then we need to get you inside. Word's probably already spread. Telegraph lines work fast when money's involved." He was right. As they walked toward the schoolhouse, Evelyn could feel the town watching. Faces in windows, figures on porches, all of them tracking her movement. The air felt electric, dangerous. Rhett walked her to her door, hand resting on his gun belt. "Lock everything. Don't open for anyone you don't trust." "That's a very short list." "Good. Keep it that way." He started to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Takes courage to stand up to people who've been stealing from you." "Doesn't feel courageous, feels terrifying. Like I said, they're not the same thing." After he left, Evelyn locked the door and wedged the chair under the handle again. Then she sat on her cot with Jacob's revolver in her lap and waited for whatever was coming. It came at midnight. Not violence. Worse. Fire. She smelled the smoke before she saw it, acrid and wrong. By the time she got to the window, flames were licking up the side of the schoolhouse, fed by something that burned fast and hot. Lamp oil. Someone had doused the building in lamp oil. Evelyn grabbed her carpet bag, shoved the legal documents inside, and ran for the door. The smoke was thicker now, making her eyes water. She yanked the chair away, threw the lock, and stumbled outside into chaos. The schoolhouse was burning. Not just burning, being consumed, flames climbing the walls with unnatural speed. And around it, silhouettes in the darkness, people watching, no one trying to help. "Move!" Rhett's voice cut through the roar of fire. He grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the building, toward the edge of town where his horse waited. "We need to go, now. My students, the books, are gone. Building's lost. You stay here, you'll be lost too." He lifted her onto his horse like she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. The horse took off before she could protest, carrying them away from the burning schoolhouse and the watching crowd and the town that had just declared war. They rode hard for maybe 20 minutes before Rhett slowed the horse, guiding it up a narrow trail into the foothills. When they finally stopped, Evelyn could still see Black Creek Ridge in the distance, the schoolhouse a bright spot of flame against the darkness. "They burned it," she whispered. "They actually burned it. They're making a point. Step too far out of line, and they'll destroy everything you care about." Rhett dismounted, then helped her down. "My cabin's another hour north. You'll stay there tonight." "I can't." "You can, and you will. Town's not safe. Not anymore." He started walking, leading the horse up the trail. "Tomorrow, we figure out who gave the order. Then, we figure out how to make them regret it." Evelyn followed, her carpet bag clutched against her chest, watching the last of her schoolhouse collapse into itself. She'd come to Black Creek Ridge to escape her grief and start over. Instead, she'd walked into a war. And whether she liked it or not, she was now a soldier in it. Rhett's cabin sat in a clearing halfway up the mountain, surrounded by pine trees that blocked it from view until you were practically at the door. It was larger than Evelyn expected. Rough-hewn logs chinked with moss, a stone chimney, actual glass in the windows. Not comfortable exactly, but solid. Built by someone who knew what winter in the mountains could do to weak structures. He led her inside without speaking, lit a lamp that revealed a single large room divided by function rather than walls. A bed in one corner, neatly made with military precision. A table and 2 chairs near the fireplace. Shelves lined with supplies, flour, coffee, ammunition, rope. Everything organized, everything in its place. the home of someone who lived alone and preferred it that way. You can take the bed, Rhett said, moving to start a fire. I'll sleep on the floor. I can't take your bed. You can and you will. Arguing about it wastes time we don't have. He coaxed the kindling into flame with practiced efficiency. There's water in the basin if you want to wash the smoke off. Food in the crate. Help yourself. Evelyn set her carpet bag down and looked around, really looked, at the place he'd built for himself. It was clean but sparse. No decorations, no personal items except for a rifle mounted above the door and a photograph on the mantel, so faded she couldn't make out the faces. How long have you lived up here? 5 years since I mustered out. He didn't turn from the fire. Bought the land for almost nothing because nobody wanted to be this far from town. Suited me fine. Still does. Were you always alone? That made him pause. His shoulders tensed, then relaxed deliberately. There were 4 of us who came back from the same unit. We thought maybe we could start over together, build something new. Turned out the war followed us home. He stood, brushing ash from his hands. 2 died in a mining accident that wasn't an accident. 1 drank himself to death. I'm what's left. The words were flat, emotionless, but Evelyn heard the weight underneath them. Survivor's guilt. She knew that particular flavor of pain intimately. I'm sorry. Don't be. They made their choices. I made mine. We all lived with the consequences. He moved to the shelves, pulling down bread and dried meat. Eat something. You'll need your strength for what's coming. What is coming? Rhett set the food on the table and finally looked at her directly. In the firelight, his scars were more pronounced, his face harder. War. The polite kind at first, lawyers, negotiations, political pressure. But when that doesn't work, and it won't, it'll turn into the other kind, the kind where people die. I don't want people to die. Then you should have left when you had the chance, because now those men in town have a choice. Accept financial ruin or remove you from the equation. Which option do you think desperate men choose? Evelyn sank into one of the chairs, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The smoke smell clung to her clothes, her hair, a constant reminder that her entire life had just burned to the ground. I don't even want their money. I never cared about the land or the mining rights. I just wanted to teach. Doesn't matter what you want. Matters what they think you'll do with the power you have. Rhett sat across from her. Right now, you're a threat because you filed that claim. Even if you sign it away tomorrow, they can't trust that you won't change your mind next week or next year, or that you won't sell your rights to someone else who will come after them harder. So what am I supposed to do? Survive long enough to negotiate from strength. Show them that killing you costs more than paying you does. He pushed the bread toward her. Eat, then sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out who exactly is pulling the strings. Evelyn forced herself to eat, though the food tasted like ash. When she finally lay down on Rhett's bed, still warm from the fire he'd built, smelling faintly of pine and leather, she expected to lie awake all night replaying the fire, the threats, the moment when her entire world shifted from difficult to dangerous. Instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, her body surrendering to exhaustion her mind couldn't fight. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving quietly around the cabin. Morning light filtered through the windows, softer than it had any right to be after everything that had happened. Rhett was at the table, cleaning one of his revolvers with the focused attention of someone performing a ritual. The weapon was disassembled into parts, each piece laid out with precision. You know how to use that? Evelyn asked, her voice rough from smoke inhalation. Better than I'd like. He didn't look up from his work. Coffee's hot if you want it. She poured herself a cup from the pot hanging over the fire, sat down across from him. What now? Now we go back to town, together. Let them see you're still alive and not scared off by a little fire. I am scared off by the fire. Then we lie. He reassembled the revolver with quick, efficient movements. Fear's useful. Shows it to them isn't. You walk back into Black Creek Ridge today like you own it, which legally you do. And you make it clear that burning down a schoolhouse just made you angry, not weak. And if they try to kill me? They won't. Not in broad daylight with witnesses. They'll wait for darkness, for isolation, for a moment when you look vulnerable. He holstered the revolver. Which is why you won't be isolated and you won't be vulnerable. They rode back to town mid-morning, Evelyn on Rhett's horse with him, close enough that anyone watching would draw conclusions. Let them, she thought. Let them think whatever they wanted. She was beyond caring about her reputation in a town that had just tried to burn her alive. The schoolhouse was a blackened skeleton, still smoking. A small crowd had gathered to stare at the ruins like they were viewing a body. When Evelyn and Rhett rode up, conversations died. People turned to watch with expressions ranging from satisfaction to guilt to carefully maintain neutrality. Mayor Hastings was there talking with the fire marshal, a volunteer position that apparently meant standing around looking official after buildings burned down. He saw Evelyn and his face went carefully blank. Mrs. Mercer, thank heavens you're safe. We were worried you might have been inside when the fire started. The lie was so blatant it took Evelyn's breath away. I'm sure you were devastated to find out I wasn't. The mayor's smile didn't waver. That's an ugly accusation. The fire marshal believes it was an accident. Faulty stove, perhaps? These old buildings, someone doused it in lamp oil. I could smell it before the flames even reached the door. Evelyn dismounted, facing him directly. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was an accident. You're understandably upset. Trauma can make us see conspiracies where there are none. And greed can make men commit arson when there are profits to protect. The crowd was growing now, people drawn by the confrontation. Evelyn could see faces she recognized, parents of former students, town council members, shopkeepers who'd been polite to her face while probably cursing her behind closed doors. Reverend Marsh pushed through the crowd, his face arranged in what he probably thought was righteous concern. Mrs. Mercer, perhaps we should discuss this in private. You're making serious allegations. I filed my land claim yesterday, Evelyn announced loudly, cutting him off. The Federal Land Office has confirmed my ownership of survey plot 447-B and all mineral rights associated with it, which means 17 mining operations in this valley are currently operating illegally on my property. The crowd erupted, shouting accusations, denials. Someone yelled that she was a liar. Someone else yelled that she was worse than a liar. She was an outsider trying to steal from honest workers. Mayor Hastings held up his hands for quiet. Mrs. Mercer, no one disputes your claim. If your late husband's family owned that land, of course it passed to you. But you need to understand, those operations have been running for years. Families depend on them. Shutting them down would devastate this entire community. Then those families should take it up with the mine owners, who never bothered to secure legal rights before extracting resources that didn't belong to them. You can't be serious about enforcing this claim. The legal fees alone would bankrupt you. Maybe. Or maybe I'll sell my rights to someone with deeper pockets who'll come after every penny owed. Evelyn let that sink in. Or maybe, and this is the option I prefer, we negotiate a settlement. I get fair compensation for years of illegal mining. You get to continue operations legally. Everyone walks away unhappy but alive. Is that a threat? The mayor's voice had gone cold. It's reality. Someone tried to kill me last night by burning down my home. If I die, those documents go to a lawyer who will pursue this claim with everything the law allows. But if I live, we can settle this like reasonable people. Rhett hadn't moved from his horse, but his presence was a weight everyone felt. His hand rested casually on his gun belt, not threatening, but not threatening either. James Pritchard spoke up from the back of the crowd. How much are we talking about? For fair compensation? Evelyn had thought about this during the ride down. The actual amount owed was probably staggering. Years of silver extraction, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But she didn't need to be rich. She needed to survive. $50,000. Total. Divided among all 17 operations however you see fit. Paid over 2 years. In exchange, I sign away all future claims and the mines operate legally going forward. Silence. People calculating, whispering, trying to figure out if it was a reasonable offer or a trap. That's a fortune, someone shouted. It's a fraction of what's actually owed, Evelyn countered. The silver pulled from that land over the past 5 years is worth 10 times that amount. I'm offering you a bargain because I don't want to spend the rest of my life in legal battles. But make no mistake, I will pursue this claim if I have to, and I will win. Mayor Hastings exchanged glances with several men in the crowd, mine owners probably, calculating their exposure. We'll need time to discuss this. $50,000 is a significant sum. You have 3 days. Then I contact my lawyer and we do this the hard way. Evelyn turned toward the burned schoolhouse. In the meantime, I'll need a new place to teach, since the town seems to have accidentally destroyed the old one. You still plan to teach? Reverend Marsh looked genuinely shocked. I was hired to teach. The contract didn't specify the building had to remain standing. Someone in the crowd laughed, quickly stifled, but there. A crack in the united front against her. Margaret Pritchard stepped forward, ignoring the warning look her father-in-law shot her. You can use the church social hall. It's empty most of the week anyway. Not ideal, but it has a roof and walls. Margaret, James Pritchard started. It's the Christian thing to do, Margaret said firmly, using religion as a shield against her own family. Unless we're going to admit we're not actually interested in being good people. The Reverend looked like he'd bitten into something sour, but he couldn't very well refuse without looking like a hypocrite. Fine, the social hall. But any more trouble, and that arrangement ends. There won't be any more trouble, Evelyn said, unless someone starts it. The crowd began to disperse, people breaking into small groups to discuss what they'd just heard. Evelyn caught fragments of conversation. 50,000 split 17 ways isn't that bad. Rather, pay her than lose everything. Still don't trust her. Rhett dismounted and came to stand beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. That went better than I expected. They're going to reject the offer. Probably. But you made them think about it. Made them do math. When men start calculating costs versus benefits, emotions take a back seat. He nodded toward the burned schoolhouse. You handled that well. I feel like I'm about to collapse. You are. But not here. Not in front of them. He offered his arm. Come on. Let's get you somewhere private before you fall apart. They walked back toward the general store where Rhett needed to pick up supplies. People watched them pass, some with hostility, others with what might have been grudging respect. Evelyn kept her spine straight and her eyes forward, playing the role of a woman who wasn't terrified. Inside the store, James Pritchard served them with stiff courtesy. As he was wrapping Rhett's supplies, Margaret appeared from the back room. That was brave, she said quietly. Stupid, but brave. Feels more stupid than brave right now. They'll take your deal. Maybe not all of them, but enough. Nobody wants federal investigators crawling through their books, and that's what happens if this goes to court. Margaret glanced at her father-in-law, who was pointedly ignoring their conversation. Where are you staying? You can't go back to the schoolhouse. I have arrangements, Rhett said before Evelyn could answer. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. I see. Well, be careful, both of you. There are men in this town who won't negotiate even when it's in their best interest. Some people would rather burn the whole place down than admit they were wrong. After they left the store, Evelyn finally asked the question that had been building. Do you think they'll accept? The smart ones will, the desperate ones won't. Question is which group has more influence. Rhett loaded the supplies onto his horse. Either way, you bought yourself time. 3 days before they have to make a decision. 3 days to prepare for whatever comes next. And what comes next? Either a negotiation or a war. He mounted the horse, then reached down to help her up. Let's hope for the negotiation. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Evelyn taught her remaining students in the church social hall, a room that echoed and had terrible lighting, but at least had walls. Sarah Brennan showed up on the first day along with 6 other children whose parents either supported Evelyn or were too poor to care about politics. My pa says you're either very brave or very stupid, Sarah announced during lunch break. He hasn't decided which. What do you think? Sarah considered this seriously. I think maybe both, but mostly brave. Stupid people don't usually stand up to the whole town. Evelyn laughed despite herself. That's probably the nicest way anyone's ever called me stupid. Teaching helped, gave her something to focus on besides the looming deadline, the constant awareness that men were meeting behind closed doors to discuss her fate. At night, she stayed at Rhett's cabin, and during the day he was never far away, usually on the ridge or somewhere in town where he could see her but remain separate. On the second day, a lawyer arrived from Copper Falls, middle-aged, competent-looking, carrying a leather satchel that probably cost more than Evelyn's entire wardrobe. Mrs. Mercer, I'm Howard Brisbane. I received a telegram about your situation and thought I should come assess the case personally. They met in the church social hall after classes ended. Brisbane spread documents across a table, copies of Evelyn's land claim, territorial mining laws, precedent cases. Your position is legally sound, he said after reviewing everything. The claim is valid, the ownership is clear, and the mining operations have been conducting illegal extraction for approximately 6 years. Based on average silver yields for this region, I'd estimate actual damages somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. Evelyn felt dizzy. That much? That much. Which is why your settlement offer of $50,000 is extremely generous. Suspiciously generous, actually. You could retire comfortably on what you're entitled to. I don't want to retire. I want to teach children and not get killed. Brisbane smiled. Admirable, if financially unwise. Still, your offer is reasonable. If the mine owners reject it, we can pursue the full amount through territorial court. It'll take years and cost a fortune in legal fees, but we'd win. And if they try to kill me instead of negotiating? The lawyer's smile faded. That's outside my area of expertise, but I'd suggest maintaining your current security arrangements. He glanced toward the window where Rhett was visible, standing guard. Mr. Callahan has a certain reputation that may be acting as a deterrent. What kind of reputation? The kind where people who cross him tend to disappear or wish they had. Brisbane closed his satchel. I'll be staying in town until this is resolved. If they accept your terms, I'll draw up the paperwork. If they don't, we'll discuss next steps. After he left, Evelyn walked outside to where Rhett was waiting. The lawyer says you have a reputation for making people disappear. The lawyer talks too much. Is it true? Rhett was quiet for a long moment, staring at the mountains. During the war, I was a tracker. My job was finding people who didn't want to be found, deserters, spies, enemy officers. After I found them, other men decided what happened next, but yeah, sometimes they disappeared. And sometimes I was the one who made that happen. Does that bother you? Every day. But being bothered doesn't change what I did, just means I remember it. He turned to face her. I'm telling you this so you understand what you're tied to by staying near me. I'm not a good man, Evelyn. I'm just a man who's trying to be less bad than he used to be. You've protected me, kept me alive when no one else would. That seems pretty good to me. Keeping one person safe doesn't balance out the scale. Maybe not, but it counts for something. She moved closer. Thank you for everything you've done. I know this isn't your fight. It is now. His voice was rough. Whether I wanted it to be or not. The deadline came on a gray afternoon that threatened rain. Evelyn was teaching mathematics when Mayor Hastings arrived with 4 other men, mine owners probably, judging by their expensive clothes and harder expressions. They stood at the back of the room, waiting in silence until Evelyn dismissed the children early. After the students left, the mayor stepped forward. Mrs. Mercer, we've discussed your offer. Evelyn's heart hammered, but she kept her face neutral. And 12 of the 17 operations have agreed to your terms. They're prepared to pay their share of the $50,000 in exchange for a legal settlement. He paused. 5 operations have refused. They claim your land claim is fraudulent and they won't be extorted. It's not extortion. It's legal compensation for illegal mining. Nevertheless, those 5 operations will not participate in any settlement. They're prepared to fight this in court if necessary. Evelyn had expected this. Brisbane had warned her that someone would refuse on principle. Then we'll pursue legal action against those 5 specifically while settling with the 12 who are being reasonable. One of the mine owners spoke up, a thin man with cold eyes. You're making a mistake. Those 5 operations are owned by powerful people. People who don't lose legal battles because they make sure the law works in their favor. The law isn't for sale. The man smiled. It wasn't pleasant. Everything's for sale, Mrs. Mercer. You just haven't figured out your price yet. Gentlemen, Brisbane's voice cut through the tension. He'd been standing in the corner, taking notes. I'll draw up the settlement documents for the 12 operations that have agreed to Mrs. Mercer's terms. As for the 5 holdouts, we'll see you in court. After they left, Brisbane turned to Evelyn. The 5 who refused are the biggest operations. They're responsible for probably 60% of the illegal extraction. If we win against them, the payout could be substantial. Or I could be dead before it goes to trial. Also a possibility, Brisbane admitted, which is why I strongly suggest you consider leaving Black Creek Ridge until this is resolved. Let me handle the legal aspects while you're somewhere safe. No, If I leave now, they'll say I was intimidated into abandoning the claim. I stay. Brisbane sighed. You're either the bravest client I've ever had or the most foolish. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm starting to think they're the same thing. That night, Rhett cooked dinner in his cabin while Evelyn paced, too restless to sit still. The settlement with 12 operations meant some money would come eventually, but the 5 holdouts were the dangerous ones. The ones with enough power to decide murder was cheaper than justice. You should eat something, Rhett said, setting a plate on the table. Not hungry. Eat anyway. Starving yourself doesn't help. Evelyn forced herself to sit, to take a bite of the stew he'd made. It was good, better than she expected from a man who lived alone. Where'd you learn to cook? Army. When you're in the field for weeks at a time, you either learn to make decent food out of terrible ingredients or you go hungry. He sat across from her. You did well today. Standing up to them again. Doesn't feel like I won anything. 5 operations are still defiant, which means 5 groups of people who want me gone. True, but 12 groups just bet their money on you surviving long enough to make the settlement official. That's 12 groups who now have a vested interest in keeping you alive. She hadn't thought of it that way. So I have allies now? Allies is a strong word. You have people whose financial interests align with your continued existence. It's not loyalty, but it'll do. A sound outside made them both freeze. Horses, multiple horses, approaching fast. Rhett was on his feet instantly, grabbing his rifle from above the door. Stay here. Don't come out unless I call for you. Rhett! Stay. Here. He slipped outside into the darkness. Evelyn waited, heart pounding, listening to the sound of horses stopping, men's voices raised in anger. She couldn't make out words, just tone, aggressive, threatening. Then Rhett's voice, lower but somehow more dangerous than the shouting. A gunshot cracked through the night. Evelyn grabbed the revolver she'd been keeping close and ran to the door. Outside, chaos. 3 men on horses, one clutching his arm where blood was already showing. Rhett, standing in front of the cabin with his rifle still smoking, aimed at the other 2 riders. Next one goes through somebody's chest instead of their arm, Rhett said calmly. Your call. You can't protect her forever, Callahan, one of the riders shouted. She's got to sleep sometime, got to be alone sometime. And when she is, we'll finish what we started. Then you better hope you find her before I find you, because if I find you first, you won't get a warning shot. The riders backed their horses away, the wounded man cursing. This isn't over. No, Rhett agreed. It's not. They rode off into the darkness, and Rhett stood watching until the sound of hooves faded completely. Only then did he lower the rifle and turn to face Evelyn. I told you to stay inside. I heard a gunshot. You thought I was hurt, so you came out armed to help. He almost smiled. Stupid and brave. Seems to be your specialty. Evelyn was shaking now, adrenaline and fear catching up with her. Who were they? Men who work for the 5 operations that rejected your settlement, probably sent to scare you, or worse. He guided her back inside, closed the door, and checked the windows. This is going to escalate. Tonight was a warning. Next time will be an attack. What do? We prepare, and we make sure that when they come for you, and they will come, they regret it. He spent the next hour fortifying the cabin, barricading windows, checking ammunition, preparing for siege. Evelyn watched him work with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, many times, and survived. Rhett? Yeah? If it comes down to my life or someone else's, if you have to kill to protect me, I need you to know I won't hold it against you. I won't judge you for it. He stopped what he was doing and looked at her. Really looked, like he was trying to figure out if she meant it. You say that now. But when you see what war looks like up close, when you watch someone die because of choices you made, you might feel different. I've already made my choice. I'm staying, I'm fighting, whatever that means. Rhett nodded slowly. Then we better make sure you know how to use that revolver, because the next time someone comes, they won't stop at warning shots. They spent the rest of the night in preparation. By the time dawn broke, Evelyn could load and fire her revolver with something resembling competence. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing. And nothing, she was learning, was the line between life and death in places like Black Creek Ridge. The attack came 4 days later, not at night like Rhett expected, but in the gray hour before dawn when exhaustion made people careless. Evelyn woke to the sound of breaking glass and Rhett's voice shouting her name. She rolled off the bed, grabbing the revolver from under her pillow, and hit the floor just as a bullet punched through the window above where her head had been. "Stay down!" Rhett was already at the window, rifle in hand, returning fire. The muzzle flash lit his face in sharp relief, concentrated, calm. The face of someone who'd done this too many times to panic. More gunfire erupted from outside. Multiple shooters surrounding the cabin. Evelyn crawled toward the table Rhett had reinforced as cover and crouched behind it, heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. "How many?" she managed to ask. "At least 6. Maybe more." Rhett fired twice more, then ducked back as return fire shattered another window. "They're not trying to scare us this time. They're trying to finish it," a voice shouted from outside, muffled but audible. "Send the woman out, Callahan. This doesn't have to involve you." Rhett's laugh was harsh. "Like hell it doesn't." He glanced back at Evelyn. "Can you shoot?" "I don't know. I've never shot at a person before." "Well, you're about to learn." He pointed to the east window. "Anyone comes through there, you put bullets in them. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Just shoot." Evelyn crawled to the window, hand shaking so badly she almost dropped the revolver. Outside, shadows moved between the trees, muzzle flashes marking their positions. 6 men, like Rhett said. Maybe 7. All of them armed and clearly willing to kill. One shadow broke away from the trees, running toward the cabin in a crouch. Evelyn aimed the revolver, finger on the trigger, and froze. She couldn't do it. Couldn't pull the trigger and end someone's life even though they were actively trying to end hers. The man reached the cabin wall. She heard him doing something outside, pouring liquid, the sharp smell of kerosene suddenly overpowering. "They're going to burn us out," Rhett said, already moving. He kicked open the door and fired 3 quick shots. Someone screamed. The smell of kerosene faded as whoever had been pouring it either died or ran. But now the door was open and men were shooting at the gap. Rhett slammed it shut again, bullets splintering the wood where his head had been a second earlier. "We can't stay here," he said, reloading with practiced speed. "They'll eventually set this place on fire or just wait until we run out of ammunition." "What's the alternative?" "We fight our way out, get to the horses and run for town. Once we're around people, witnesses, they'll have to back off." He looked at her directly. "But that means going through them. And that means killing. Can you do that?" Evelyn thought about Sarah Brennan's face when she'd said she hoped Evelyn would stay. Thought about the other children who were counting on her. Thought about Jacob and the life they'd planned before the war took him away. She was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of men deciding her fate through violence. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." Rhett nodded once, something like respect in his eyes. "On my signal, we go out the back window. You go first. I'll cover you. Don't stop moving no matter what you hear behind you. Get to my horse and wait for me there." "What if you don't make it?" "Then you ride like hell for town and don't look back." He moved to the back window, checking the area outside. "Ready?" Evelyn wasn't ready, would never be ready for this, but she nodded anyway. Rhett smashed out the remaining glass with his rifle butt and fired several shots into the darkness to clear a path. "Go! Now!" Evelyn threw herself through the window, hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs, and scrambled to her feet. Behind her, gunfire exploded as Rhett laid down covering fire. She ran toward where the horses were tethered, expecting a bullet in the back with every step. A man appeared from her left, raising a rifle. Evelyn didn't think, just aimed and fired. The revolver kicked in her hand, the sound deafening. The man staggered but didn't fall. She'd missed or hit him somewhere non-fatal. He swung his rifle toward her. Another shot rang out and the man dropped, blood blooming on his chest. Rhett, still at the window, already moving to the next target. Evelyn reached the horses, fumbling with the tether rope. Her hands wouldn't work properly, shaking too hard. Behind her, more gunfire, men shouting, someone screaming. Finally, the rope came free. She grabbed the horse's mane and hauled herself up. No saddle, no time, just desperate need to be anywhere but here. Rhett appeared from the darkness at a dead run, pursued by 2 men. He spun, fired twice. Both men went down. Then he was swinging onto the horse behind Evelyn, wrapping one arm around her waist, taking the reins with the other. "Hold on!" The horse bolted, crashing through undergrowth, branches whipping at them. More shots followed, but they were moving too fast, the darkness too complete. Within minutes, They'd left the attackers behind. They rode hard for maybe 20 minutes before Rhett slowed the horse to a walk, both of them gasping for breath. Evelyn was shaking uncontrollably now, adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. "You okay?" Rhett's voice was rough against her ear. "I shot at someone." "I know, I saw. I tried to kill him." "You defended yourself. Big difference." His arm tightened around her waist, steadying. "How do you feel?" "Sick, terrified, angry." She twisted to look at him. "You killed 2 men back there. How do you feel?" "Same as you, just more used to it." His face was grim in the pre-dawn light. "Those men chose to attack. They knew the risks. What happened to them is on them, not you." "Will there be consequences? The law?" "The law in Black Creek Ridge is controlled by the same people who just tried to murder you. We report this, and they'll find a way to twist it around, make us the aggressors." He guided the horse toward town, moving carefully now. "But we've got something they don't want. Witnesses who'll talk if the right person asks. And I know exactly who to tell." They reached town as the sun was breaking over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold that felt obscene given what they'd just survived. People were starting to emerge for the day, shopkeepers opening, miners heading to work, normal life continuing like the world hadn't just tried to murder 2 people in the dark. Rhett rode straight to the federal marshal's office, a small building Evelyn had barely noticed before, staffed by a deputy who looked about 19 and scared of his own shadow. "I need to report an attempted murder," Rhett announced, dismounting and helping Evelyn down. "Multiple armed men attacked my property before dawn, with intent to kill Mrs. Mercer here." The deputy's eyes went wide. Marshal Thompson's in Copper Falls right now. Won't be back for 3 days." "Then write it down. We're making an official report. Date it, sign it, file it, and send a telegram to the Territorial Marshal's office in Helena. Tell them a property dispute in Black Creek Ridge has escalated to attempted murder, and we need federal investigators." "Sir, I don't have authority to—" Rhett leaned across the desk, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "You have authority to write down what I'm telling you and send a telegram. That's your job. Do it." The deputy scrambled for paper and pencil, hand shaking as he wrote. While he worked, Evelyn sank into a chair, exhaustion and shock finally overwhelming her ability to stand. She could still smell kerosene and gunpowder, could still feel the revolver's kick against her palm when she'd tried to kill someone. Brisbane appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd dressed in a hurry. "I heard gunfire earlier, thought it might involve you." 6 or 7 armed men attacked Rhett's cabin, Evelyn said, voice flat. "They tried to burn us alive. When that didn't work, they tried to shoot us. Rhett killed at least 2 of them." Brisbane's expression went cold. "This has escalated beyond property disputes. We're talking about conspiracy to commit murder now. That's federal jurisdiction, which is why I'm having the deputy send for federal marshals," Rhett said. "But that'll take time. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mercer needs somewhere safe to stay, somewhere public where attacking her would be witnessed by dozens of people." "The hotel," Brisbane suggested. "I'll rent her a room, multiple rooms if needed. We'll make sure she's never alone and never in a position where someone can get to her without being seen." "I don't have money for a hotel. Consider it a legal expense. I'm billing it to your eventual settlement." Brisbane was already moving. "Come on, we'll get you situated, and then I'm calling an emergency town council meeting. The people who did this need to understand that murdering my client will bring federal consequences they can't escape." The hotel was nicer than anywhere Evelyn had stayed in years. Actual wallpaper, a real bed with clean sheets, a window that locked from the inside. Brisbane rented the room next door for himself and arranged for a rotation of townspeople to keep watch in the hallway. Not guards exactly, but witnesses. People who could testify if anything happened. Evelyn sat on the bed and stared at her hands. They'd stopped shaking, but she could still feel the revolver's weight, still see the man she'd shot at staggering backward. A knock on the door made her flinch. "It's Margaret," a woman's voice called. "I brought food and some clothes. Can I come in?" Evelyn opened the door. Margaret Pritchard stood there with a basket and a carpet bag, her face tight with anger. "I heard what happened. The whole town's heard by now. Someone attacked Rhett's place, tried to kill you both." She pushed past into the room. "James is at an emergency council meeting. I snuck out because I needed to say this to your face." "Say what?" "That I'm sorry. For pulling my daughter from your class. For not standing up to the people who were threatening you. For being a coward." Margaret set the basket down. I knew something bad was building. Everyone knew. But we all told ourselves it wasn't our problem, wasn't our responsibility. And now people are dead because we didn't stop it when we could have. It's not your fault.
Isn't it? Isn't it all of our faults for letting this happen? Margaret's voice cracked. You came here alone, grieving, just trying to teach children their letters. And we made you into an enemy because it was easier than admitting we'd been stealing from you for years. That's not just wrong, that's evil. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. The anger in Margaret's voice was genuine, raw, guilt that had been building for weeks finally breaking through.
What's happening at the council meeting? She asked instead. Brisbane is demanding they identify who ordered the attack, threatening to bring federal charges against the entire council if they don't cooperate. Margaret pulled clothes from the bag. A dress, actually nice, probably one of her own. Rhett's there too. I've never seen him angry before. It's terrifying. He told them in detail what he's going to do to anyone who comes near you again. What did he say? That he's tracked men across 3 territories during the war and killed them in ways that made other soldiers refuse to talk about it. That if anyone else tries to hurt you, he'll find them. And when he does, the territorial marshal's office won't be able to identify the bodies. Margaret met Evelyn's eyes. I think he meant it. He did. Evelyn remembered the efficiency with which Rhett had killed those 2 men. No hesitation, no wasted motion, just deadly competence. He's good at violence. And you're okay with that? I'm alive because of that. So yes, I'm okay with it. Margaret studied her for a long moment. You've changed since you arrived. You're harder now. This town made me harder. You can't survive here by being soft. No, Margaret agreed quietly. I suppose you can't. She left after helping Evelyn wash and change into clean clothes. The dress fit reasonably well, though it was looser than Evelyn's own had been. She'd lost weight in the past weeks without noticing. Brisbane returned an hour later with Rhett. Both men looked grim. The council won't name names, Brisbane reported. They claim they don't know who ordered the attack, that it was probably independent actors who took matters into their own hands. It's garbage, obviously, but without proof we can't compel testimony. What about the federal marshals? Telegram's been sent, but it'll be at least a week before anyone arrives from Helena. Maybe longer. He sat down heavily. In the meantime, you're a target. We need to assume another attack is coming. Let them come, Rhett said flatly. Next time I won't aim for wounding shots. That's exactly the wrong approach, Brisbane argued. If you kill too many people, they'll paint you as the aggressor. Turn this into a story about a dangerous war veteran who went mad and murdered innocent townspeople. You need to stay defensive, not offensive. Defensive gets her killed. Offensive gets her arrested for murder. They argued while Evelyn sat silent, listening to men discuss her life like it was a legal brief instead of actual existence. Finally, she cut through their debate. What if I leave? Both men stopped talking and stared at her. Not permanently, Evelyn clarified. Just until the federal marshals arrive. Get out of town. Go somewhere safe. Let Brisbane handle the legal aspects. Then come back once there's actual law enforcement to protect me. That's surrender, Rhett said. They'll claim victory, say they drove you out. I don't care what they claim. I care about staying alive. Evelyn stood, pacing. I can't teach with armed men outside my door. Can't sleep without wondering if tonight's the night someone breaks in. Can't live like this. A tactical retreat isn't the same as giving up. Brisbane nodded slowly. It's not a terrible idea. Remove yourself from the immediate danger while we work the legal angles. Once federal authority is established, you come back from a position of strength. Where would you go? Rhett asked. I don't know. Copper Falls? Somewhere with actual law enforcement? Too close. Anyone determined enough could follow you there. Rhett thought for a moment. My brother's in Denver, runs a freight business. You could stay with his family for a few weeks. No one from Black Creek Ridge would think to look for you there. You have a brother? Had. He survived the war, which makes him the smart one. Rhett's voice was dry. We don't talk much, but he'd take you in if I asked. Keep you safe until this is resolved. Evelyn wanted to refuse. Wanted to stay and fight, prove she couldn't be intimidated. But she was exhausted, bone-deep tired from weeks of constant fear. Maybe retreat was the smart choice. Maybe living to fight another day was actually winning. Okay, she said finally. I'll go to Denver, but I'm coming back. This isn't over. No, Brisbane agreed. It's not, but it gives us time to build a proper legal case, and it keeps you alive while we do it. They spent the rest of the day making arrangements. Brisbane sent telegrams, bought a stage ticket, prepared documents. Rhett packed supplies for the journey with military efficiency. Evelyn said goodbye to her remaining students, promising Sarah Brennan she'd be back soon. You're really leaving? Sarah's eyes were wet. Just for a little while, until it's safe, but I will come back. I promise. Adults always say that, then they don't.
I'm not like other adults. Evelyn crouched down to eye level. I keep my promises.
And I promise you, I'm coming back to finish teaching you mathematics and reading and everything else you need to know. Sarah hugged her fiercely, then ran out before Evelyn could see her cry. That night, Evelyn stayed in the hotel with Brisbane standing guard. Rhett was somewhere outside, watching from shadows. The town was quiet, but tension hummed underneath the silence. Everyone knew she was leaving tomorrow. Everyone was waiting to see if she'd actually make it to the stage. Morning came cold and clear. Evelyn, dressed in traveling clothes Margaret had provided, packed the few belongings she had left, and walked out into a main street that felt like a gauntlet. People lined the boardwalks, not overtly threatening, just watching. Witnesses to her departure. Some looked satisfied, others looked guilty. A few looked genuinely sad. The stage was already waiting. Rhett loaded her bag while Brisbane handed over her ticket. Telegram my office when you arrive, Brisbane instructed. I'll keep you updated on developments. If anything changes, if the marshals arrive early, I'll send word immediately. Thank you for everything. Just doing my job, which is keeping you alive long enough to collect your settlement. He smiled slightly. Though I'll admit, you've become more than just a client. Try not to get killed in Denver either. Rhett helped her into the stage, then stood in the doorway, blocking everyone's view. My brother's name is Thomas. Tell him I sent you. He'll understand. Will you be okay here?
I'll be fine. I'm not the one they want dead. His voice dropped lower. Take care of yourself, Evelyn, and come back. This town needs someone like you, even if they're too stupid to realize it. What about you? Does the town need you? The town needs me to be exactly what I am, a reminder that violence has consequences. That's the only language some men understand. He stepped back. Go. Get out of here before someone decides to stop the stage. The driver cracked his whip and the coach lurched forward. Evelyn watched through the window as Black Creek Ridge receded into the distance. Watched Rhett standing in the street, rifle in hand, making sure no one followed. She felt like she was running away, like she'd failed somehow by leaving. But she was alive. And sometimes survival was its own kind of victory. The journey to Denver took 3 days. 3 days of rattling coaches and poor food and sleeping in way stations that smelled like unwashed bodies. But also 3 days of distance from immediate danger. 3 days to breathe without checking over her shoulder. Thomas Callahan's freight office was easy to find, right on Larimer Street, busy with workers loading wagons. The man himself was younger than Rhett, maybe early 30s, with the same build but fewer scars. His face lit up when Evelyn mentioned his brother's name. Rhett sent you? Is he okay? He hasn't written in months. He's fine. Protecting me, actually. I need somewhere to stay for a few weeks until some legal matters are resolved. Thomas didn't ask questions, just took her bag and led her to a house 3 streets over, where his wife and 2 young children were eating breakfast. Within an hour, Evelyn had been fed, given a room, and absorbed into a family that asked nothing except that she be safe. Life in Denver was strange, normal in a way Black Creek Ridge had never been. Children played in streets without fear. Women walked alone without checking for threats. The law actually worked instead of being a tool for whoever had the most money. Evelyn helped with the children, taught them their letters, and tried not to think about the town she'd left behind. But every night she dreamed of fire and gunshots, and Rhett's face in the moment he'd killed to protect her. Brisbane's telegrams arrived weekly. The federal marshals had reached Black Creek Ridge. Investigations were underway. Several town council members were being questioned. The 5 mine operations that had refused her settlement were under scrutiny for fraud and attempted murder. Then, 3 weeks after she'd arrived in Denver,
A telegram that changed everything. Mayor Hastings arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Reverend Marsh implicated. 3 mine owners fled before arrest. Federal marshal requests your return to testify. Case building toward trial. Brisbane. Evelyn read it 3 times, hands shaking. They'd actually done it. The law had actually worked. You going back? Thomas asked, reading over her shoulder. I have to. They need my testimony. Rhett won't like that. He specifically told me to keep you here until it was completely safe. It's as safe as it's going to get. And I made a promise to some children that I'd come back. Evelyn folded the telegram carefully. Besides, I'm tired of hiding. Thomas laughed. You sound exactly like Rhett. Stubborn and stupid and brave all at once. People keep saying that. Maybe it runs in families you associate with. He bought her a stage ticket that afternoon. His wife packed food and extra clothes and made her promise to write. The children hugged her goodbye and begged her to come back someday. The return journey felt different. Evelyn wasn't running toward danger now. She was running toward justice, toward closure, toward the life she'd tried to build before everything exploded. Black Creek Ridge looked different when she arrived. Smaller, somehow. Less intimidating. The stage dropped her on the main street, and suddenly she was standing in the place that had tried so hard to destroy her. People stopped and stared. Conversations died. Someone ran toward the marshal's office. Evelyn picked up her bag and started walking toward the hotel. She made it maybe 10 steps before Rhett appeared, moving fast, his face a mixture of anger and relief. What are you doing here? Thomas was supposed to keep you in Denver. Your brother tried. I didn't listen. She smiled. Stubbornness must run in the family. You could have been killed on the road, could have been ambushed before you reached town. But I wasn't. Because you taught me to be careful. And because the men who wanted me dead are either arrested or running. She reached out and touched his arm. It's over, Rhett. We won. It's not over until there's a trial and convictions. Until then, you're still in danger. Then I guess you'll have to keep protecting me. Something shifted in his expression, the constant wariness easing just slightly. You're impossible. I learned from the best. Federal Marshal Thompson was waiting at the hotel with Brisbane. Tall, gray-haired, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen too much but refused to look away. He stood when Evelyn entered. Mrs. Mercer, thank you for coming back. I know it wasn't safe, but your testimony is crucial. What exactly happened while I was gone? Thompson pulled out a notebook. Based on evidence we've gathered, Mayor Hastings orchestrated a conspiracy involving 5 mine owners and Reverend Marsh. They hired local men to harass you, burn the schoolhouse, and ultimately attempt murder. We've arrested Hastings and Marsh. 3 mine owners fled. We're pursuing them. The other 2 are cooperating in exchange for reduced charges. And the men who attacked the cabin? 2 dead at the scene, killed by Mr. Callahan in clear self-defense. 3 arrested based on witness testimony. 1 still at large but unlikely to return given the circumstances. Thompson closed his notebook. The trial starts in 2 weeks. We'll need you to testify about everything. The threats, the fire, the attack. Your testimony combined with the evidence we've gathered should be enough to secure convictions. What happens to the town after that? That's up to the people who live here. The corrupt leadership will be gone. The mining operations will be reorganized under legal ownership. Yours, if you choose to pursue it. Black Creek Ridge will have a chance to rebuild itself properly. He studied her. Question is, will you stay to help with that rebuilding, or will you take your settlement and leave? Evelyn hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't let herself imagine a future where Black Creek Ridge was actually home instead of battleground. I don't know, she admitted. I came here to teach. That's all I ever wanted. But after everything that's happened, the town needs a teacher. Brisbane interjected. Several parents have approached me asking when classes will resume, including some who previously pulled their children from your classes. They want me to teach after trying to run me out? They want their children educated, and you're the only teacher within 100 miles who's proven she won't quit when things get hard. Brisbane smiled. Also, the 12 mine operations that settled with you have pooled resources to build a new schoolhouse. Bigger, better equipped. Consider it an apology written in timber and nails. Despite everything, Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the possibility of hope. I'll think about it, she said. After the trial? After I see justice actually delivered. Then I'll decide if this place can be home. The trial took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony and evidence and watching the men who'd tried to kill her squirm under federal scrutiny. Mayor Hastings maintained his innocence right up until one of the cooperating mine owners testified that Hastings had explicitly ordered Evelyn's murder. Then he crumbled, trying to negotiate a plea deal that would save him from hanging. Reverend Marsh was worse. He claimed moral authority, insisted everything he'd done was to protect the town's values. The judge shut him down halfway through his speech. This court has no interest in your twisted interpretation of morality, Mr. Marsh. You conspired to murder a woman for financial gain. That's not righteousness. That's greed dressed in religious language. Save your sermons for prison. The verdicts came down hard. Hastings and Marsh both got 20 years. The 2 cooperating mine owners got 5 years each plus massive fines. The men who'd participated in the cabin attack got 10 to 15 years depending on their level of involvement. The 3 mine owners who'd fled were tried in absentia and convicted. Warrants issued for their arrest. It was over. Actually, finally over. Evelyn stood outside the courthouse in afternoon sun that felt warmer than it should and realized she was crying. Not from sadness, from relief, from the weight of weeks of fear finally lifting. Rhett found her there, standing on the steps, tears running down her face. "You okay?" "I don't know. I think so." She laughed, wiping at her eyes. "They're going to prison. All of them. Justice actually happened." "It did. Because you were brave enough to stay and fight." He offered his arm. "Come on. Brisbane wants to discuss settlement details. Apparently you're about to become a very wealthy woman." The settlement numbers were staggering. 50,000 from the 12 operations who'd negotiated early. Another 100,000 from the 5 operations whose owners were now either in prison or fugitives, their assets seized and liquidated to pay restitution, plus court-ordered damages for the schoolhouse fire, the attack, emotional distress. Total comes to approximately $170,000, Brisbane said, laying out the paperwork. Minus my fees and court costs, you're looking at roughly $150,000. That's enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Go anywhere. Do anything. Evelyn stared at the numbers. More money than she'd ever imagined having. More money than seemed real. "What if I wanted to stay here?" she asked quietly. "Use some of it to rebuild properly. The school, maybe other buildings. Help turn Black Creek Ridge into something better than it was." Brisbane looked surprised. Rhett looked like he'd expected exactly this. "That would be remarkably generous given how this town treated you," Brisbane said carefully. "Or remarkably stupid," Evelyn countered. "But I made promises to children here, and maybe I want to prove that you can take something broken and make it better. That you don't have to burn everything down to start over. You're serious about this?" "Completely." She signed the papers Brisbane put in front of her. "How much would it cost to build a proper school? Not just a building, a real academy with books and supplies and maybe a teacher's cottage that doesn't have gaps in the walls? Maybe 10,000 for something truly excellent. Do it and find out what other buildings the town needs. A proper medical clinic, maybe. A library." She was thinking out loud now, ideas coming faster than she could articulate them. This money came from the land here. Seems right to use it to build something that benefits everyone. After Brisbane left to start making arrangements, Rhett sat across from her, studying her face. "You really want to stay here? After everything?" "I think I do. This place tried to kill me and failed. Now I get to help remake it into something that wouldn't try to kill the next person who threatens the status quo." She met his eyes. "What about you? Will you stay?" "My cabin's gone. Burned by the men who attacked us." "So build a new one. Or—" She hesitated. "Or don't live in the mountains alone anymore. Come down. Be part of the town you helped save." "I'm not a town person." "You weren't a protector person either until you decided to be." Evelyn reached across the table, taking his hand. "I'm not saying you have to change who you are, just that maybe you don't have to be alone anymore. Maybe we've both earned the right to stop running from connection." Rhett's hand tightened around hers. "You know what you're asking. People in town still fear me. Still tell stories about the things I did during the war. Let them tell stories. I know who you actually are, and that's who I want around." He was quiet for a long moment, something vulnerable showing through his usual careful control.
I killed men to protect you. That blood doesn't wash off. I know, and I'm grateful for it. Does that make me a bad person? Makes you human. He stood but didn't let go of her hand. Okay, I'll stay. Help you build this new version of Black Creek Ridge, but don't expect me to be charming at town socials.
I'll settle for you being alive at town socials. The new schoolhouse went up fast, faster than Evelyn expected, built by men who suddenly seemed eager to prove they weren't like the people who'd been sent to prison. The structure was beautiful, real wood floors, large windows that let in natural light, a potbelly stove that could actually heat the whole room. Behind it, a cottage for the teacher. Small but solid, a real home. Evelyn moved in on a cold November morning, carrying boxes of books Brisbane had ordered from Denver. She was arranging them on shelves when someone knocked. Sarah Brennan stood in the doorway with her father, a thin man who looked exhausted but determined. Mrs. Mercer? I'm Daniel Brennan, Sarah's father. I wanted to apologize for not standing with you earlier. When you needed support, I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my job at the mine. You don't need to apologize, Mr. Brennan. I do, because my silence could have gotten you killed, and I need my daughter to see that when you're wrong, you admit it and try to do better. He glanced down at Sarah. That's why I'm here. I'd like Sarah to resume her education, if you'll have her. Of course I'll have her. Evelyn smiled at the girl. Classes start Monday, and I promise this time I won't disappear. Other parents came throughout the day. Some apologetic, some defensive, all of them wanting their children back in school. By evening, Evelyn had 26 students enrolled, almost as many as she'd started with. Progress. Slow, imperfect, but real. That night, Rhett came by with supplies for the cottage. He'd been working on his own place, not in the mountains this time, but on the edge of town where he could see both the wilderness and the community. Town council wants to make you an official marshal, he said, unloading firewood. Part-time position. Keep the peace, handle disputes. What did you tell them? That I'd think about it. Not sure I'm suited for law enforcement. You kept me alive when actual law enforcement couldn't. Seems like you're suited enough. He smiled slightly. That was personal. This would be professional. Different standards. Maybe. But the town needs someone who isn't afraid to stand up to powerful men. Someone who's already proven he will. Evelyn moved closer. Take the job, Rhett. Help me make this place better. You're very good at convincing people to do things they didn't think they wanted to do. Only when I'm right. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay, I'll take the job, but only if you promise to keep teaching. Because if I'm going to be part of this community, I want it to be one that values education over ignorance. Deal. They stood together in the small cottage, surrounded by books and possibilities, and the future neither of them had expected to have. Outside, Black Creek Ridge was settling into evening routines. Somewhere, children were doing homework. Parents were making dinner. Life continuing in all its mundane complexity. Evelyn had come here running from grief, looking for a place to hide from her pain. Instead, she'd found a war. And in fighting that war, she'd found herself again. Not the person she'd been before Jacob died, but someone stronger. Someone who didn't run when things got hard. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything you did, for keeping me alive. Thank you for giving me a reason to, Rhett replied. I'd forgotten what it felt like to care about something beyond survival. They'd both been broken when they met, both running from violence and grief. But somehow, together, they'd managed to build something new from the wreckage. Not a perfect story, not smooth or easy, just real, just human. And that, Evelyn thought, was worth more than any amount of silver pulled from the ground. Winter came early that year, blanketing Black Creek Ridge in snow that transformed the rough mining town into something almost beautiful. Evelyn watched from her cottage window as children threw snowballs in the street, their laughter carrying on the cold air. 6 months ago, she'd been sleeping with a revolver under her pillow, expecting every night to be her last. Now she was planning Christmas lessons and wondering if the stove would keep the schoolhouse warm enough during the coldest months. Progress was slow. Some families still wouldn't send their children to her classes, too much pride, too much resentment about the settlements their employers had been forced to pay. But 26 students had become 32, then 38. Word was spreading to outlying ranches and homesteads that Black Creek Ridge had a real school now, with a real teacher who wouldn't quit when things got difficult. Rhett had taken the marshal position, though he insisted on calling it temporary, even after 3 months. Evelyn watched him navigate town politics with the same careful precision he'd used tracking enemies during the war. He didn't make friends easily, but he made people feel safe. That counted for more than charm in a place still rebuilding trust. On a Thursday morning in December, Margaret Pritchard showed up at the schoolhouse with her daughter Lily, and an expression that suggested she'd been arguing with herself for weeks. "I'd like to re-enroll Lily," she said without preamble. "If you'll take her. I know I don't deserve consideration after pulling her out, but of course I'll take her." Evelyn knelt down to smile at the girl. "Welcome back, Lily. We're working on multiplication tables this week. Think you can catch up?" Lily nodded shyly, and Margaret's eyes went suspiciously bright. "Thank you," Margaret whispered. "James is furious with me for coming here, but I don't care anymore. Lily deserves better than growing up thinking women should stay quiet when men do terrible things. She'll learn more than multiplication here," Evelyn promised. "She'll learn that standing up for what's right matters more than keeping the peace." After Margaret left, Sarah Brennan appeared at Evelyn's desk during recess, her face serious in the way only 8-year-olds could manage when they had something important to say. "Mrs. Mercer, are you going to marry Mr. Callahan?" Evelyn nearly dropped the chalk she was holding. "What makes you ask that?" "Because he's always here, walking you home, fixing things in the cottage, sitting in the back during lessons like he's guarding you. My pa says Mr. Callahan looks at you the way he used to look at my ma before she died." Sarah tilted her head. "So are you?" "I don't know, Sarah. We haven't discussed it." "You should. He's lonely, and you're lonely, and you make each other less lonely. That seems like a good reason to get married." Out of the mouths of children, Evelyn thought, 8 years old and already understanding what some adults spent lifetimes avoiding. "I'll think about it," she said, which made Sarah grin like she'd solved a difficult equation. That evening, Rhett came by the cottage as he did most evenings, ostensibly to check the locks and make sure the stove was working properly. Really, Evelyn suspected, because being alone in his half-finished house was harder than he wanted to admit. "Sarah Brennan asked me today if we're getting married," Evelyn said while making coffee. Rhett froze in the act of adding wood to the stove. "What did you tell her?" "That we haven't discussed it." "Have we been discussing it without me noticing?" "Not directly, but we've been circling it for months." Evelyn handed him a cup. "You're here almost every night. Half your clothes are in my spare room. The town already assumes we're together even if we haven't made it official." "Official means expectations, promises. I'm not good at those. You kept me alive through attempted murder. You helped rebuild a school. You took a job you didn't want because the town needed you. You're better at promises than you think." Rhett sat at her small table, staring into his coffee like it held answers. "I watched my friends die because they made promises. To their families, to the army, to each other. Those promises got them killed. For 5 years I told myself the only way to survive was to not promise anything to anyone. And now? Now I don't know what I'm doing. I care about you. More than I thought I was capable of caring about anyone. But caring about things in my experience leads to losing them." He looked up, and the vulnerability in his face was almost painful to witness. "What if I'm not enough? What if you realize you could have done better than a scarred-up tracker who's more comfortable with violence than conversation?" Evelyn sat across from him, taking his hands. "I don't want better. I want you. The man who watched over me from ridges before I knew he existed, who taught me to shoot because he knew I'd need to defend myself, who killed to protect me and carries that weight without complaint." She squeezed his hands. "You're not broken, Rhett. You're just someone who survived things that should have destroyed you. That's not weakness. That's strength. You make it sound noble. It doesn't feel noble. Feels like cowardice most days. Being too afraid to let someone close because losing them would be worse than staying alone. Then be afraid. Be terrified. But don't let fear make your decisions for you." Evelyn leaned forward. "I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for real. And what we have, messy and complicated and built on violence and survival, that's as real as it gets." Rhett was quiet for a long time, his scarred hands warm in hers. Outside, snow fell in thick flakes, muffling the world into silence. If we do this, he said finally, if we make it official, I need you to understand something. I will disappoint you. I'll be difficult and closed off and better at tracking criminals than expressing emotions. There will be days when you wonder why you chose someone this damaged. And I'll have days when I'm impossible to live with. When grief for Jacob catches me unexpectedly and I shut down. When I'm so focused on teaching I forget to eat or sleep. When stubbornness makes me pick fights I should walk away from. She smiled. We're both damaged, Rhett. Maybe that's why this works. We're not trying to fix each other. Just survive together. Is that what marriage is? Survival? The good ones? Yes. You survive grief and disappointment and all the ways life tries to break you. And you do it together because together is less lonely than apart. He stood, pulling her up with him, and for a moment just held her. Not romantic or dramatic, just two people who'd been alone too long finally admitting they didn't have to be anymore. Okay, he said against her hair. Let's make it official, but I'm not proposing with some pretty speech. This is what you get, a damaged man who's better at violence than romance, but who will spend the rest of his life making sure you're safe and choosing you every day, even when it's hard. That's the best proposal I've ever heard. It's also the only proposal you've ever heard. Doesn't make it less true. They married in March when the snow finally melted and Black Creek Ridge emerged muddy and disheveled but alive. The ceremony was small. Brisbane served as witness, Margaret and her daughter attended, Sarah Brennan cried happy tears, and Daniel Brennan played fiddle for the reception. Reverend Marsh's replacement, a younger man who'd heard what happened to his predecessor and seemed determined to avoid similar mistakes, performed the service with genuine warmth. He spoke about second chances and rebuilding and how sometimes the strongest foundations were built on broken ground. Evelyn wore a dress Margaret had helped her sew. Nothing fancy, just simple blue fabric that made her eyes look brighter. Rhett wore his best shirt and looked uncomfortable in clean clothes, like a wolf trying to pretend it belonged in a parlor. But when he said his vows, his voice was steady. I promise to protect you, to stand beside you when things are difficult, to be honest even when honesty is hard, and to try every day to be worthy of choosing me. Evelyn's vows were simpler. I promise to stay, to build a life with you, to not run when things get scary, and to remind you on your worst days that you're better than you think you are. They were promises born from violence and survival, not poetry, but they were real. And real was what mattered. The reception was held in the new schoolhouse, which had enough space for maybe 50 people. Twice that many showed up, miners and shopkeepers and ranchers who'd watched Evelyn fight for her life and earned their grudging respect. Not everyone was happy about the marriage. Some still whispered that the widow teacher and the dangerous tracker were an unnatural pairing. Let them whisper, Evelyn thought. She'd survived worse than gossip. James Pritchard approached during the dancing, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Callahan? Or is it still Mrs. Mercer for teaching purposes? Either works. What can I do for you, Mr. Pritchard? I wanted to apologize for my part in what happened. I knew the mayor was planning something against you, and I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my position on the council. He twisted his hat in his hands. That was cowardly. I should have stood up for what was right. You're standing up now. That counts for something. My daughter-in-law says you're a better person than I deserve teaching my granddaughter. Margaret's right about most things. Evelyn softened her tone. But I'm not interested in punishing people for past mistakes, Mr. Pritchard. I'm interested in building something better going forward. If you want to be part of that, you're welcome to try. He nodded, relief evident on his face, and moved away. Margaret caught Evelyn's eye from across the room and mouthed, "Thank you." The party went late into the night. Daniel Brennan's fiddle was joined by a guitar and a harmonica, creating music that was more enthusiasm than skill, but perfect for the occasion. Children ran wild, hopped up on cake. Adults drank and danced, and for a few hours forgot about the hardness of frontier life. Rhett didn't dance, but he stood at the edge of the crowd with Evelyn, his hand resting on the small of her back, watching the town celebrate. You did this, he said quietly, turned a place that tried to kill you into something resembling community. We did this. You were the one who made them afraid enough to negotiate instead of just murdering me. Fear's not community. No, but it's a foundation. People respected my rights because they feared the consequences of not respecting them. That gave us time to build actual trust. She leaned into him. Fear and respect aren't opposites. Sometimes fear is how respect begins. Sarah appeared at their side, tugging on Evelyn's sleeve. Mrs. Callahan, will you still be our teacher now that you're married? Of course, why wouldn't I be? Mama used to say married ladies don't work. They stay home and have babies. Evelyn knelt down. Some married ladies do that, and that's fine. But some married ladies keep working because they love what they do. I love teaching. Marriage doesn't change that. So you're not going to have babies? Maybe someday. But even if I do, I'll still teach. Women can do more than one thing, Sarah. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The girl nodded seriously, then ran off to tell her friends this revelation. Rhett helped Evelyn to her feet. You're going to raise a generation of women who don't accept limitations. That's the plan. The world changes one classroom at a time. They left the party around midnight, walking back to the cottage through streets that were finally quiet. Behind them, the schoolhouse glowed with lamplight and laughter. Ahead, their home waited. It wasn't much, a small cottage with barely enough room for 2 people, let alone the life they were trying to build. But it was theirs, earned through survival and stubbornness and refusing to let violence have the final word. Inside, Rhett built up the fire while Evelyn changed out of her wedding dress. When she emerged in a simple nightgown, he was standing by the window, staring at the mountains visible in the moonlight. Having second thoughts? She asked. Just thinking about how different tonight is from what I expected a year ago. Last winter I was alone in a cabin, convinced I'd die alone. Now I'm married to a woman who's braver than most soldiers I served with. He turned to face her. Doesn't feel real yet. Give it time. Real sneaks up on you. Evelyn moved to stand beside him. What will you do with your land? The property where your old cabin was? Thought I might build something there. Not a cabin, something bigger. A place for people who need temporary shelter. Homesteaders passing through, families fleeing trouble, people like you were when you arrived. A way station. He shrugged. Probably stupid. I'm not good with people. You're good at protecting people. That's more valuable than being good at conversation. She took his hand. Build your way station. I'll help. We'll make Black Creek Ridge into a place that actually welcomes people instead of trying to run them off. You realize that's going to take years, maybe decades. This town's rot runs deep. Then we have time. We're not going anywhere. They stood together at the window, watching snow begin to fall again, and Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, too much pain behind them for simple happiness, but contentment, the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. The following months brought challenges that tested their fragile new life. In April, one of the mine owners who'd fled before trial was captured in California and brought back for sentencing. His arrest triggered threats from supporters who still believed Evelyn had destroyed an honest man's life out of greed. Someone painted thief across the schoolhouse wall. Rhett caught them the next night and made it very clear that property destruction would be met with legal consequences and possibly broken bones. The vandalism stopped. In June, a territorial inspector arrived to verify the mining operations were following their new legal agreements. He spent 2 weeks auditing books and interviewing workers. His report praised Evelyn's restraint and fairness in negotiating settlements that could have bankrupted the entire valley. The report got published in newspapers as far as Denver, turning Evelyn into something she'd never wanted to be, a symbol. Letters arrived from other women in other territories, asking for advice on how to stand up to men who controlled their communities through intimidation. Evelyn tried to answer them honestly, explaining that survival wasn't about being fearless. It was about being too stubborn to quit, even when quitting made sense. You're becoming famous, Brisbane said during one of his visits. I've had 3 newspapers ask for interviews. A publisher in New York wants you to write a book about your experiences. I'm not writing a book. I'm teaching children their multiplication tables. You could do both. Your story matters, Evelyn. Women need to know it's possible to fight back and win. Women need to know it's possible to fight back and survive, she corrected. Winning is secondary to not dying. That's the real lesson. But she agreed to one interview with a female journalist from a San Francisco newspaper. The resulting article painted Evelyn as a frontier hero who'd single-handedly taken down corruption and rebuilt a community. It was flattering and mostly inaccurate. They left out the part where I was terrified every single day, Evelyn complained to Rhett after reading the piece. Made it sound like I had some grand plan instead of just stumbling through each crisis as it happened. People don't want complicated truth, they want simple heroes. Rhett was cleaning his rifle at the table, a weekly ritual. Let them have their version. You know what actually happened. That's what matters. Does it bother you that they barely mention you in the article? You're the reason I survived. I don't need credit. I need you alive and the town functional. Both of those are true, so I'm content. By autumn, Black Creek Ridge had transformed in ways subtle but significant. The new marshal, a young man Rhett had trained who actually smiled at people, was handling most day-to-day law enforcement. The town council had 3 new members who hadn't been involved in the previous corruption. The miners were organizing into a proper union with legal representation, and the school had expanded. Evelyn now had 47 students and had hired a second teacher, a woman from Chicago who'd heard about the position and traveled west specifically because she wanted to work somewhere that valued education over social status. This is what winning actually looks like, Margaret said one afternoon while watching the children pour out of the schoolhouse for recess. Not dramatic or perfect, just better than it was. Better is good enough, Evelyn agreed. Perfect is a fantasy. Better is achievable. The second winter brought its own trials. Rhett's way station was finished and immediately needed. A family of homesteaders whose wagon had broken down stayed for 2 weeks while repairs were made. A woman fleeing an abusive husband hid there for a month until relatives could come collect her. A group of miners who'd been cheated by their employer used it as temporary shelter while Brisbane helped them file legal complaints. The way station became a symbol of what Black Creek Ridge could be, a place that protected vulnerable people instead of exploiting them. Not everyone appreciated the change. Some of the old guard still grumbled that Evelyn had ruined a good town with her meddling, that women should know their place, that outsiders bringing modern ideas would destroy traditional values. Let them grumble, Evelyn thought. The children she was teaching would grow up in a different world, a world where women owning property wasn't scandalous, where workers had legal protections, where education was valued over ignorance. Change didn't happen in dramatic moments. It happened in classrooms and conversations and small daily choices to be better than you were yesterday. One evening in late December, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Evelyn told Rhett she was pregnant. They were sitting by the fire in their cottage, exhausted after a long day. She'd been feeling sick for weeks but had attributed it to stress and bad food. When the doctor confirmed otherwise, she'd spent hours figuring out how to break the news. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, because there was no gentle way to deliver information that would change everything. Rhett went very still, set down the book he'd been reading, stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "Pregnant," he repeated. "About 3 months along, the doctor thinks, which means a summer baby." "A baby?" He still looked stunned. "We're having a baby. Is that okay? I know we never discussed it. I know you have concerns about bringing children into a life that's been as violent as ours. It's more than okay." His voice cracked slightly. "It's terrifying and wonderful, and I have no idea how to be a father, but yes, it's okay." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious that might break. Evelyn felt him shaking and realized he was crying, silent tears that he probably hoped she wouldn't notice. "I never thought I'd have this," he whispered. "A family. A real life. Something worth protecting that wasn't just survival. You have it now. We both do." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while snow fell outside and the fire crackled and the future they'd been too afraid to imagine became real. The pregnancy was difficult. Evelyn taught through morning sickness and exhaustion, determined not to let her students fall behind. Margaret stepped in to help, teaching lessons when Evelyn was too ill to stand. The other teacher, a woman named Caroline, took over the older students' classes entirely. "You need to rest," Rhett insisted after finding Evelyn collapsed at her desk one afternoon. "The baby needs you healthy. The students need me teaching. The students need you alive. There's a difference." She finally agreed to reduce her hours, teaching only mornings and letting Caroline handle afternoons. It felt like failure, even though everyone insisted it was reasonable. Evelyn had spent so long defining herself through work that stepping back felt like losing part of her identity. "You're not just a teacher," Rhett reminded her during one of her frustrated moments. "You're also going to be a mother. That's not less important." I know, but I worked so hard to build something here. I don't want to lose it. You won't. The school will be fine. The town will be fine. You need to be fine too. The baby came in July during a heat wave that made everyone miserable. The labor was long and painful, and Evelyn understood why women died from childbirth. It felt like dying. But eventually, after 18 hours that seemed eternal, a baby boy arrived screaming his displeasure at being forced into the world. They named him Jacob Daniel Callahan. Jacob for Evelyn's late husband, Daniel for Sarah Brennan's father, who'd become a friend and supporter. Rhett held his son with the careful terror of someone who'd spent years destroying things and suddenly had something fragile to protect. He's so small. He'll grow. Evelyn was exhausted but couldn't stop staring at the baby's face. He'll grow and we'll teach him, and he'll be better than both of us. That's a low bar given what we've survived. Exactly. Which means he'll have advantages we never had. Safety, education, parents who love him. She reached for Rhett's hand. We're going to be terrible at this sometimes. We'll make mistakes and second-guess ourselves and worry we're damaging him. That's not comforting. But we'll try. Every day we'll try to be better. That's all anyone can do. The town rallied around them in ways Evelyn hadn't expected. Margaret brought meals. Caroline offered to watch the baby during school hours so Evelyn could keep teaching part-time. Sarah Brennan appointed herself the baby's official protector, visiting daily to make sure he was growing properly. Even some of the old guard who'd opposed Evelyn softened when they saw her with the baby. Motherhood, apparently, made her more acceptable than teaching ever had. She found that both insulting and pragmatically useful. Brisbane visited when Jacob was 3 months old, bringing legal documents that needed signing. The last of the settlements have been finalized, he explained. The 3 mine owners who fled have been officially convicted. Their assets are being liquidated. Your share of the final settlement comes to an additional $40,000. Evelyn stared at the number. That's more money than I can possibly need. Then use it for something that matters. Brisbane smiled. The territorial government is considering a proposal for a teacher training academy, somewhere to educate women who want to teach in frontier communities. Your story has inspired interest in actually supporting educators instead of expecting them to survive on poverty wages and community goodwill. How much would an academy cost? Initial funding? Probably $60,000, but with your contribution plus some territorial grants, it's feasible. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Do it. Use the money. Build something that helps other women avoid what I went through. You're sure? That's your security, your children's inheritance. My security is a town that finally values education. My children's inheritance is a world that's better than the one I entered. Money accomplishes that better than sitting in a bank. Brisbane drew up the paperwork, and within 6 months, the Western Territorial Teacher Academy opened in Copper Falls. It started with 15 students. Within 2 years, it had 50. Women who'd never imagined they could be more than wives and mothers learned they could be educators, leaders, agents of change in communities that desperately needed it. Evelyn never taught at the academy. She was too busy with Black Creek Ridge's growing school and raising Jacob. But she visited occasionally, speaking to students about survival and stubbornness, and the difference between giving up and strategic retreat. The key to surviving difficult circumstances, she told a classroom of aspiring teachers, is accepting that survival is enough. You don't have to be heroic, you don't have to change the world overnight. You just have to wake up the next morning and try again. Everything else builds from there. By the time Jacob was 2 years old, Black Creek Ridge was almost unrecognizable from the hostile place Evelyn had arrived in 5 years earlier. The town had grown, new businesses, new families, new possibilities. The school had 68 students and 3 teachers. The way station was handling a steady stream of people needing temporary help. Red had trained 2 deputies and was finally comfortable enough with the town's stability to step back from daily marshal duties. He still wore the badge, but spent most of his time at the way station, providing the kind of practical help he was better at than law enforcement. Do you ever regret staying? Evelyn asked him one evening while watching Jacob play with wooden blocks. After everything that happened, do you wish you'd convinced me to leave? Every day I'm grateful you were too stubborn to listen. He pulled her close. This isn't the life I expected, but it's better than anything I imagined I deserved. You deserved better than violence and isolation. Maybe, but I got something better anyway. I got you, and him. He nodded toward Jacob. and a purpose that isn't just surviving until I die. That's more than most people get. Margaret visited that afternoon with news. James is stepping down from the town council. His health isn't good and he wants to spend time with his grandchildren. They're asking if you'd consider running for his seat. Me? On the town council? Why not? You own more land than anyone else in the valley. You've invested more money in community development than the previous 3 councils combined, and people actually trust you now, even some who opposed you initially. Evelyn looked at Rhett, who shrugged. Your decision. Though it'd be interesting watching you argue with the same people who tried to run you out of town. That's exactly why I shouldn't do it. I'm vindictive enough to enjoy it too much. But she ran anyway, and won by a margin that surprised everyone, including herself. The first town council meeting she attended was surreal. Sitting at a table where men had once plotted her murder, now discussing school funding and infrastructure development. Mrs. Callahan has proposed expanding the school again, the new mayor announced. Adding 4th and 5th teachers, building additional classrooms, it'll require a town tax increase. I vote yes, said one of the other council members. As do I, said another. It passed unanimously. Evelyn sat there feeling like she'd stepped into an alternate reality where reason had replaced greed as the town's guiding principle. After the meeting, the mayor, a shopkeeper who'd always been neutral during the conflicts, approached her. I need you to understand something, Mrs. Callahan. The reason people are willing to invest in education now isn't just because it's right. It's because you proved education creates value. The children who've gone through your school are better workers, better citizens, better at solving problems than the previous generation. Business owners see that. Even the cynical ones recognize that investing in education is investing in the town's future. So they're supporting education for economic reasons, not moral ones. Does it matter? As long as children are learning, does it matter why adults agreed to fund it? Evelyn thought about that. I suppose not. I just wish people could support good things because they're good, not because there's profit involved. That's a luxury frontier towns can't afford. Everything here is about survival, economic, social, physical. But you've shown that education improves survival rates. That's why they're investing. It wasn't the idealistic answer she wanted, but it was honest, an honesty she could work with. Years passed in a blur of ordinary moments that somehow added up to extraordinary change. Jacob grew into a curious, stubborn child who asked constant questions and reminded Evelyn painfully of herself. The school expanded twice more. Rhett's Way Station became a recognized stop on several major routes, mentioned in travelers' guides as a reliable safe haven. Evelyn gave birth to a daughter they named Claire, after no one in particular, just a name they both liked that didn't carry the weight of memory. Claire was easier than Jacob had been, quieter, more observant. She watched everything with serious eyes and spoke in complete sentences by age 2. Margaret's granddaughter Lily became one of Evelyn's best students, showing talent for mathematics that eventually earned her a spot at the Teacher Academy. She returned to Black Creek Ridge after graduation and became the school's 4th teacher, specializing in advanced mathematics and sciences. You created this, Margaret said, watching her granddaughter teach a geometry lesson. A girl from this town, educated here, becoming a teacher herself. That's generational change. That's what winning actually looks like, Evelyn replied. Not dramatic transformation, just people being slightly better than their parents were, giving their children slightly better opportunities. Enough of that over time, and you get real progress. By the time Evelyn was 35, Black Creek Ridge had been reorganized as an official township with full territorial recognition. The population had tripled. The school had over 100 students and 6 teachers. The mining operations were unionized and operating under fair labor agreements. And Evelyn Mercer Callahan was serving her 2nd term on the town council while teaching part-time and raising 2 children who'd never known hunger or fear or the particular terror of being unwanted. Do you think about the early days? Rhett asked one evening while they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Jacob and Claire were playing in the yard, arguing about some game with rules only they understood. The fire, the attacks, all of it? Sometimes. Usually when I'm having a difficult day and need to remind myself I've survived worse. Evelyn leaned against him. Do you? More than I'd like, but differently now. Used to think about it with regret. All the violence, the men I killed, the damage I did. Now I think about it as the cost of building this. He gestured toward their children, their home, the town visible in the distance. Not proud of what I had to do, but I understand why it was necessary. We were both different people then. We were people trying not to die. Now we're people trying to live. Big difference. Evelyn thought about that. The distance between surviving and living, and how she'd somehow crossed from one to the other without noticing the exact moment it happened. "I'm glad you stayed," she said quietly. "I'm glad you chose to protect me instead of just watching from the ridges. I'm glad you were too stubborn to leave. Saved me from having to die alone on that mountain." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play, and Evelyn felt something she'd spent years chasing finally settle in her chest. Peace. Not the absence of struggle. There would always be struggles, but the presence of purpose, connection, and the bone-deep certainty that she'd built something worth the pain it had cost. The wilderness hadn't destroyed her like she'd feared when she first arrived. It had forged her into someone stronger, someone who could stand in fire and emerge still standing, someone who could take a broken town and help rebuild it into something resembling community. And that, Evelyn thought while watching the sun paint the mountains gold, was the real victory. Not the money or the settlements or even the justice. The victory was surviving long enough to see that survival had been worth it, that the life on the other side of violence and fear was actually worth living. "Mama," Claire called from the yard. "Jacob says mountains are alive. Tell him he's wrong." "Mountains aren't alive in the way people are," Evelyn called back, "but they're always changing, always moving, so maybe alive in a different way." "See," Jacob crowed, "I told you." "That's not what she said," Rhett chuckled. "They argue like you do, passionately, and about things that don't matter." "Everything matters when you're 7 and 5. They'll figure out priorities eventually." "Will they?" "You still argue about everything. I've just refined my priorities. Now I argue about things that actually matter, like education funding and fair wages, and whether coffee should be made strong or reasonable. That matters too." They watched their children argue and play and grow up in a town that, while imperfect, was better than it had been. Better than it might have been if Evelyn had quit when quitting made sense. The story could have ended differently. Should have ended differently if statistics and probability had any say. A widow alone in a hostile town usually didn't survive, let alone thrive. But Evelyn had been stubborn enough to refuse the usual ending, had fought hard enough to write a new one. And in doing so, she'd learned something important, that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and acting anyway. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear make your decisions. She'd come to Black Creek Ridge running from grief, hoping the wilderness would let her disappear into anonymous teaching. Instead, she'd been forced to fight for her life, her property, and her right to exist in a space that didn't want her. The fighting had nearly killed her, but it had also transformed her into someone who wouldn't be killed easily. Someone who could look at violence and corruption and injustice and say, "No, not here, not anymore." That was the real lesson, she thought. Not that good always triumphed or that justice was guaranteed, but that ordinary people could become extraordinary when circumstances demanded it, that a grieving widow and a damaged tracker could somehow build a life worth living from the wreckage of everything they'd lost. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere in town, lamps were being lit, families were sitting down to dinner, children were being tucked into bed, life continuing in all its mundane, precious complexity. Evelyn stood, pulling Rhett up with her. "Come on. Time to get these two inside before they discover a new thing to argue about." "You mean before Claire bites Jacob again?" "She only bit him twice. She's learning impulse control. She's 5. Impulse control at that age is knowing not to bite hard enough to draw blood." They herded their children inside, into warmth and lamplight and the ordinary chaos of family life. And as Evelyn helped Claire wash for dinner while Rhett negotiated with Jacob about eating vegetables, she realized this was what winning looked like. Not perfect, not smooth, just real people trying their best and occasionally succeeding. Building a future one stubborn choice at a time, refusing to let the past dictate what came next. The widow nobody wanted had become someone the town needed. The dangerous tracker had become a protector. Together, they'd taken a place built on greed and violence and slowly, painfully, imperfectly, transformed it into something resembling home. And that was enough. Not everything, but enough. More than enough.
yesterday. I took the day off of work because I haven't been feeling that great. Last Wednesday, I got notification I'm being laid off. But there are positives. I mean, it's not, you know, being laid off sucks either way you look at it, right? But I got 60 days notice and I have a severance package and I'm going to be I'm going to be doing well financially. Um, but yeah, it just kind of sucks, man. I didn't officially tell Stream really until like starting this week. Like I kind of told some of Stream on Saturday, but not really. I don't know how else to say it because I was still processing, obviously. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kamaya. Yeah, it sucks, but whatever. Kate said lost at Yarn Chicken, but mostly finished baby sneakers. Oh my God. Oh, I bet they're adorable. Started another romper for baby shower gifts. Oh, that's amazing. We love a little romper. They're so cute. If you'd like to post into Discord, you can, or give a link to an image of like your progress that you made today. You're welcome to post it here. It's up to you, Kate.